Chapter 940. A crescent moon illuminated the barren mountains, flickering in and out of the clouds condensed from black-red demon chi. It had also been dyed scarlet. A huge stone demonic formation was erected on the barren mountains. The jagged rocks were engraved with strange demonic inscriptions, standing in rings one after another. Demon chi surged into the air from the concentric rings, connecting the sky and the earth, spreading out into thick, demonic clouds in the air. Looking down from above, people surged about on the barren mountains. The densely packed demon folk surged about like ants. Under the command of the demon generals, they carried the stone pillars to their designated locations. As the stone pillars were erected, the surging demon chi became denser and denser, shrouding the stars and moon. Although their bodies completely surpassed mortals, the arduous work still filled the demon folk with complaints. They were not the low-level corpses and ghosts of the hungry ghost realm. They also had normal emotions. Crack! With the crisp sound of a whip, a four-armed, four-legged demon folk supervisor swung the metal whip in his hand, lashing it viciously against the head of a slacking demon folk. His brain immediately burst open, and he rolled down the mountain. This is the fate of anyone who dares to slack off. Keep working. Don't stop. The demon folk supervisor swept his metal whip and glanced down the mountain, smiling viciously. The slacking demon folk's corpse rolled all the way to the foot of the mountain, where it stopped moving. A while later, the corpse suddenly leapt up, rushing off into the jungle with half of its head still. Pairs of red eyes lit up in the jungle. Squeak, squeak. Black figures whizzed through the canopy, chasing after the fleeing demon folk and swooping down. As it turned out, it was a group of wild monkeys. These monkeys that should have been regular beasts had become abnormally vicious. Basically, all of their fur had fallen off, revealing their muscular bodies and sharp claws and teeth. The prolonged, miserable cries of fleeing demon folk rang out in the jungle. The demon folk's supervisor sneered a few more times. Humph! Everything within 50 kilometers of the demon cavern has been affected by demon chi. It's not just the wild beasts. Even the trees have been demonified. It's just wishful thinking if you think you can escape with just your tough life force. The stronger your life force, the greater the pain you endure. However, when a demon general glared at him, the demon folk supervisor immediately stopped smiling. He thought viciously inside, "You're just a mere demon general. You might be slightly stronger than me, but you're still expendable. Even a few demon commanders have died. I'd like to see how long you can remain complacent for." Crossing a long, straight gully, he could not help but think of the majestic sword chi he had seen 3 days ago. He shivered inside. There were several dozen gullies like that on the barren mountain. The huge stone pillars had been cut in half smoothly. The demon folk's primary job was to repair the huge stone formation. In the center of the huge stone array, where the surging demon chi was located, there was a huge and strange purple-red ball of flesh floating in the air. Blue veins and blood vessels were densely intertwined, and thousands of tentacles with hideous sharp thorns were floating quietly. At first glance, they seemed exactly the same as humans, but at a closer glance, some of them had 4 or 5 eyes, while others had a pair of wings. Coupled with their strange, colorful attire, they seemed sinister and strange everywhere. At first glance, they were almost exactly the same as humans, but upon closer inspection, some of them had 4 or 5 eyes, some had a pair of wings, and they were dressed in strange clothes of various colors, giving off a ghastly and strange feeling. At first glance, they seemed exactly the same as humans, but at a closer glance, some of them had 4 or 5 eyes, while others had a pair of wings. Coupled with their strange, colorful attire, they gave off a sense of gloom and strangeness. The moon flickered in and out of view. The demon folk were currently in full swing. The purple-red ball of flesh suddenly trembled, and its thousands of tentacles straightened out as if it was searching for something. It was cautious. "Sir." The demon commanders began to move. Like statues that had sprung to life, they bowed towards the purple-red ball of flesh politely. "That sword cultivator has come again. Activate the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous and prepare for battle." An invisible thought radiated out from the purplish-red ball of flesh. The demon folk cast aside what they were doing and dispersed loudly, gathering towards the demon cavern in the center of the huge stone formation. The demon folk overseer swung his iron whip and sent a few demon folk blocking his way flying. He strode forward. The 12 stone pillars under the feet of the 12 demon marshals suddenly lit up with demonic light. The stone pillars on the periphery also lit up. In the blink of an eye, all the stone pillars were lit up, illuminating the entire barren mountain. The demonic chi faintly formed a majestic city wall. "I wonder if I can survive this time. That sword cultivator is even more powerful than regular demon kings." Even that big bastard, the Thousand Tendrils King, suffered greatly in their first clash. All he could do was maintain his demonified form. Those important figures have their own ambitions, yet they just have to make us risk our lives for them. What a bunch of kind-hearted people. They deserve to die. They deserve to die. The demon folk's supervisor thought to himself. Suddenly, he heard a strange, shrill whistle. Before he could even respond, a streak of light tore through the air and whistled over, killing its way into the grand city formed by the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. Light shot out in all directions as sword chi surged. Wherever it passed by, demon chi split open and the stone pillars snapped. Swept by the residual sword chi, the demon folk were torn to pieces and scattered. The Thousand Tendrils King swung his tentacles madly, lashing them at the streak of light. At the same time, he radiated with invisible waves of demonic consciousness in an attempt to disturb his opponent's mind. However, the sword cultivator merged with his sword, twisting and turning between the tentacles and cutting through them one by one. His heart of the sword had been thoroughly tempered, so it was not affected at all. "Yi Duanhai, there will be a day when I flatten your South Sea Sword Pavilion and kill everyone close to you. I'll make you watch them wail until they die with your own eyes." The Thousand Tendrils King's roars filled the demonic clouds as demon chi surged. The newcomer was the master of the Sword Pavilion. "Yi Duanhai?" He said nothing coldly, completely disdainful of speaking to the Thousand Tendrils King. However, in less than 10 minutes, he had pulled back. He felt rather helpless inside. Although he seemed to have gained the upper hand, he was unable to deal a fatal blow to the Thousand Tendrils King. And, under the influence of the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, advancing was even more difficult than moving through the thick earth. His powers were depleted extremely quickly, so he could not fight for long. In that short period of time, the sea-splitting sword in his hand had become covered in a layer of gloominess tainted by demon chi and demon blood. It would take quite a lot of effort to clean it up. If he just left it there, it would gradually turn into a demonic weapon, which would affect his heart of the sword instead. Of course, he could choose to put his life on the line or organize even more people to surround him. But once the situation went awry, the Thousand Tendrils King would immediately retreat to the demon domain. It would be impossible for him to pursue them, and the other demon caverns would receive the news and speed up their attacks. As a result, this was destined to be a war of attrition. Right now, all he could do was constantly wear them down, preventing the demon folk from gaining a stable footing. Eventually, there would come a day when they could no longer withstand the exhaustion and would retreat. However, he understood very well that this hope was minuscule. Compared to the previous invasions of the demon folk throughout history, this could only be regarded as a probe right now. It was not even a true attack, let alone a general attack or a decisive battle. Thinking up to there, he could not help but frown. Just what kind of state would the world of the 9 provinces fall to? Chapter 941. That's right. Yi Duanhai raised his guard instinctively. The sea-splitting sword in his hand thrummed slightly as he was slightly surprised. Since when did the Mist Province gain an expert like this? He can actually make me feel threatened. As a great sword cultivator, his heart of the sword was clear, allowing him to make a sharp judgment over the strength of others. Although the Mist Province had plenty of great cultivators and great demons, there were only a handful that could truly threaten him. Even if he was not their opponent, he could advance and retreat with ease. However, in that moment, he could clearly sense that if he became enemies with this meteor, he could not even guarantee that. The meteor fell extremely quickly. Its target was the barren mountain. Yi Duanhai found the light to be rather familiar. He raised an eyebrow. It's him. The meteor arrived before him, and the wind and fire dispersed loudly. A handsome man with scarlet hair, scarlet eyes, and a pair of horns appeared. He was clad in scarlet demonic armor, with an azura armament hanging from his waist. He withdrew his phoenix wings and clasped his hands. Pavilion Master Yi, long time no see. Li Qingshan. Yi Duanhai could not help but be slightly surprised. He praised, "You haven't wasted the past decade, or so." Time waits for no one. Just when Li Qingshan was about to make small talk, the demon chi he gave off alarmed the 1,000 Tendrils King. He called out, "You have a demon heart. You're also a demon. Lend me a hand and kill this sword cultivator. I have endless benefits for you." Li Qingshan sniggered, revealing his sharp teeth. He turned around and asked, "Brother Meatball, can you tell me in detail just what these endless benefits are?" Yi Duanhai grew even more cautious. He silently tightened his grip on the sea-splitting sword. He also doubted Li Qingshan's intentions for coming here. "Don't be rude. I'm the 1,000 Tendrils King. Kid, the demon domain can give you whatever benefits you want. Once we take over this world, even making you the lord of a province won't be an issue." The 1,000 Tendrils King tempted him. "Really?" Li Qingshan behaved like he was interested. "Really?" The 1,000 Tendrils King waved his tendrils like a human, waving his arms to increase his persuasiveness. However, he was secretly mocking them in his heart. These people from the outer domain are really stupid. They have a demonic heart, but they actually trust others. Yi Duanhai pulled away from Li Qingshan and reminded him, "Li Qingshan, don't forget who you are. Pavilion Master Yi, don't worry. I just want to see how much I am worth. I heard that in order to rope in the cultivators of the 9 provinces, the demon region would put out a lot of good items." Li Qingshan waved his hand and abandoned Yi Duanhai. He approached the demon cavern, arriving at the edge of the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. That's right. The demon domain has opened its doors wide to convert people into demons. People like you who possess a demon heart are even more fortunate. As the saying goes, the sea of bitterness has no bounds. Repent, and you will be saved. Pick up the butcher's knife and immediately become a demon. Don't hesitate, and quickly convert to the demon domain. I can see that your demonic nature is not weak, and you will soon become a demon king. In the future, you might even surpass me and become a demon emperor. The 1,000 Tendrils King saw how tempted Li Qingshan was, so he spared no effort in persuading him. The demonic senses he gave off vaguely possessed a soul-stirring charm. "But I don't want to be the lord of a province. Can I ask for something else?" Li Qingshan tilted his head. "What do you want?" For example, this ball of flesh." Li Qingshan pointed his finger straight at the 1,000 Tendrils King's original body. "What did you say?" The 1,000 Tendrils King said furiously. "Ha! I can tell you're reluctant to part with it. Whatever, I'll just take it myself." Li Qingshan smiled resplendently before suddenly widening his eyes. The nightmare tiger's demon eyes. A scarlet tiger appeared behind him. Its body was as large as a mountain, flickering in and out of existence. Only its eyes were extraordinarily focused, staring at the Thousand Tendrils King. Glancing past from the corner of his eye, the barren mountains fell silent. The demons were all shocked, while the weaker demon folk felt like they had fallen into a nightmare. The Thousand Tendrils King trembled as well, becoming slightly distracted. By the time he returned to his senses, Li Qingshan had already vanished from where he was, appearing in the center of the formation before the demon cavern. He raised his right hand gently, and with a clang, Tiger's Fang left its sheath. In that moment, an extremely sharp streak of light whistled through the air, cutting through the surging demonic qi in a single stroke. Yi Duanhai was alarmed. Even among great cultivators, he ranked towards the top in speed with his sword, yet Li Qingshan had actually surpassed him. The power of the strike was even more startling. That's only because I've weakened the 12 Citadel demon formation of the ominous by a lot, but that's already extremely terrifying. He hasn't even undergone the third heavenly tribulation. Among demons, the ones with the fastest speed were obviously those with feathers, and the phoenix was the god of feathers. Li Qingshan had pushed the phoenix transformation from the second layer to the fourth layer, which increased his speed tremendously. Li Qingshan turned around again and produced a circular blade, aura, swinging out a second time. Wherever the blade, aura, reached, the 12 demon commanders could not even demonify in time. They were swallowed up by the blade aura and reduced to smithereens. After what seemed like a very long time, the 12 stone pillars collapsed. The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous had fallen. The demonic clouds in the sky dispersed, and a crescent moon shone down on Li Qingshan. His long, scarlet hair that drifted in the air had yet to touch the ground. Yi Duanhai finally stopped worrying. Li Qingshan had not come to submit to the demon folk, but this was the Li Qingshan in his memories. Even when he was weak, he refused to lower his head, let alone now. The demon qi around the demon cavern was extremely dense. Even great cultivators would feel uncomfortable if they stayed here for a while. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath, and the demon qi surged in, channeling it into his demon heart. His demonic armor became even more resplendent. There was not a single part of Li Qingshan that feared demon qi. The ox demon and tiger demon were demons in the first place, so the phoenix demon and spirit turtle were even less afraid of measly demon qi. The demon suppression statuary directly used demon qi as a resource. To regular cultivators, this was the greatest disturbance and obstruction, but it was instead a form of assistance to him. Li Qingshan lowered his head and took a look. Tiger's Fang had devoured the essence blood of the 12 demon commanders, filling up with blood-red light once more. With a flip of his wrist, the blade rose up into the air. A streak of light rushed into the sky, directly towards the Thousand Tendrils King in the air. You're also a demon, so why do you become a lackey of humans and oppose us demons? The Thousand Tendrils King suddenly discovered that he had completely underestimated Li Qingshan's strength. He did not need to undergo the third heavenly tribulation. He was already a demon king right now, and he had to sacrifice over a dozen more tentacles to block the streak of light. Bastard, don't put me on the same level as you. Tiger's Fang in Li Qingshan's hand conveniently recovered its blood-red light. It became even more bloodthirsty and thirsty. It was not as precious as the sea-splitting sword. It did not care whether it was the corrupted blood of demon folk or not. As long as it was blood, it was fine. It was not picky at all. What a blade! Li Qingshan praised. Although he had used Tiger's Fang plenty of times in the past, it would usually only be 3 strikes. After 3 strikes, it would no longer be of much use, and he would even have to expend his own blood. Only now did it truly unleash its wonders. Enemies with huge bodies and powerful regenerative abilities were basically the best targets for him to test his blade on. Shrill whistles rang out by his ears. The tentacles danced about madly, lashing towards Li Qingshan like long whips. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. He stood still and did not move at all. 100 streaks of blade aura shot out like 100 flowers. When the tentacles fell in, they seemed to enter a meat grinder being ground to pieces. Demon blood poured down, sucked clean in the air. Every streak of blade aura sucked the demon blood as it cut through the tentacles, allowing him to instantly recover. He swung his blade even faster than usual, actually seeming like he had swung out 100 times at the same time. Moreover, every single strike was even more powerful than Yi Duanhai's sword chi. As a result, the 1,000 Tendrils King was unable to approach him even though he had many tentacles. I really should use the blade. Li Qingshan's blade style still had traces of the path of the sword in the beginning, but they gradually vanished completely. He unleashed them as he wished, moving freely and freely. As Yi Duanhai recovered his strength, he sighed in amazement inside. This kid already seemed extremely powerful normally, but he was even more impressive in battle. Suddenly, he thought of something and warned, "Be careful!" The 1,000 Tendrils King, who had been hovering in the air without moving the entire time, suddenly smashed towards Li Qingshan's head with a speed that did not match his colossal body. A huge eye opened up on the ball of flesh. It was completely blood-red, interweaving into strange demonic patterns. It stared at Li Qingshan and radiated with powerful demonic intent. Li Qingshan paused, and 1,000 tentacles swarmed down, drowning him out. In that instant, rocks flew everywhere, and the barren mountain shook violently. I'd been too careless. How can a demon king be so easy to deal with? Yi Duanhai had suffered from this move before, so he was constantly on guard. He dared not use his full strength. He drew his sword and was about to lend a hand when a metallic hum suddenly rang out from the entangling tentacles. Nice ball. Li Qingshan's figure expanded, turning into a towering demon. He broke free from the tentacles and unfurled his pitch-black, iron-like arms, grabbing the falling ball of flesh firmly and hefting it on his shoulders. Boom! Li Qingshan's feet sank in. The barren mountain seemed to turn into a small slope, immediately collapsing. Li Qingshan's waist bent down, and the sound of metal twisting rang out from his bones. However, he possessed the strength of the earth. His strength came from the ground and was endless. He held off the 1,000 Tendrils King firmly. After the 1,000 Tendrils King's tentacles were severed, they would always regrow very quickly, wrapping around Li Qingshan layer by layer to kill him. The sharp barbs pierced through his skin, injecting the venom of the demon domain. Yi Duanhai glanced around and suddenly discovered a beautiful woman in simple clothes had appeared above the 1,000 Tendrils King at a certain time. Even he had almost failed to sense her. She was not just concealing her presence. Instead, she had no presence at all, like a piece of withered wood. Pale white flames burned in the depths of Little N's clear eyes. She held a shiny, white bone sword in her hand. That sword. With his sharp understanding of the path of the sword, Yi Duanhai immediately sensed that the sword in Little N's hand was different. It did not give off a particularly sharp aura, but it made him feel a sense of fear for some reason. He could not allow that sword to harm him. Little N swung the sword casually without any presence at all, as if she was writing or painting. Not only had she studied the Buddhist Dharma with the divine none of the South Sea over a decade ago, but she had also completely comprehended and fused the path of the sword from the cursive sword calligraphy, which even left a great sword cultivator like Yi Duanhai in amazement. The Buddha slaying sword stabbed into the Thousand Tendrils King's body. Compared to his colossal body, it was only equivalent to a thin needle, and the wound was no different from the eye of a needle. Arg! The Thousand Tendrils King let out a miserable cry. With his regenerative abilities, even if Yi Duanhai and Li Qingshan slashed him, they would not be able to harm him, much less behave like this. However, after receiving a gentle strike from Little N, he was like a punctured balloon, rapidly withering away. Demon blood and demon chi sprayed out from the tiny eye of a needle. After calming down and imagining it if he had been encircled and ambushed by them instead, his life would also be in danger. Of course, if Yi Duanhai threw all caution to the wind, he could force the Thousand Tendrils King into dire straits. However, the Thousand Tendrils King would definitely drag someone down with him before he died, and that would be almost certain death. It was impossible for Yi Duanhai to perish together with his enemy. No cultivator would do that either. The main reason why Li Qingshan was bold enough to face the Thousand Tendrils King head-on was because of the phoenix's Nerva. If you're bold enough to perish together with me, I'm bold enough to die with you once. All right, one down. Li Qingshan returned to Yi Duanhai. Thank you for weakening this bastard, Pavilion Master Yi, which was why we could kill him successfully. Otherwise, just the formation alone would be enough of a headache. There's no need to be so polite. Even without me, you can still kill him. Yi Duanhai could not help but re-evaluate Li Qingshan and Little N. During the battle on Firemelt Mountain, Li Qingshan had spent most of the time working with Gong Yuan, while Little N had never taken action. Although he had played a crucial role in the victory of the battle, only now had he completely demonstrated his strength, so he could not help but take him seriously. Though, I do have a request. I hope you won't make the exact details of what happened tonight known, Pavilion Master Yi. It might come in handy against the demon kings of the other demon caverns. Do you think I'm a talkative person? Yi Duanhai had realized a long time ago that what Little N used was definitely not a Buddhist technique, or in other words, the two of them did not seem like Buddhist disciples at all. They had far too many secrets that they did not wish for others to learn about. Compared to demon folk, they were probably even more reluctant for the Chan Monastery of Devanaga to learn about them. Chapter 943. Why have you come here? Yi Duanhai hesitated, but he still could not hold back his doubts in the end. To help her cultivate. Li Qingshan pointed at the collapsed mountain, little and bathed in the moonlight, currently cultivating with her eyes closed, digesting the Thousand Tendrils King and the demon folk. Beneath her inhumanly beautiful face would appear a vicious skeleton from time to time, but it was only a fleeting glance. Even with Yi Duanhai's cultivation, he was unable to see it clearly. However, he was 100% certain that it was a powerful demonic art, and the white bone sword was definitely not used to protect the Buddhist Dharma. I see. And I had thought you also had the heart to uphold justice and purge demons, Yi Duanhai said in a self-deprecating manner, hoping that two existences that had transcended the boundaries of humans would have thoughts like that was a little presumptuous. However, the reason why he asked this was because he felt a sense of worry or even a hint of fear. The soaring Locust King had already proven in the Green Province just what kind of destruction a great demon could cause once they decided to wreak havoc. Once the two of them completely matured, they would probably be even more terrifying than 10 soaring Locust Kings. By then, with just a single thought, they could influence the entire world of the 9 provinces. There were in the past, but as for now, there's not much left. Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. Who hadn't dreamed of being a chivalrous hero? They wanted to use their swords to uphold justice in the world. However, as they grew stronger and stronger and stood taller and taller, they instead felt like they could only control themselves. "Let me treat you to a drink." Li Qingshan was rather surprised. Originally, he thought Yi Duanhai would bid farewell in silence, so he smiled. "All right, now that you mention it, I've realized it's already been over a decade since I've had a drink." The two of them sat down on the lush crown of a large tree and took out 2 jars of alcohol to drink. They conversed slightly. An hour later, Little and stopped cultivating and returned to Li Qingshan's side. Yi Duanhai had already bid farewell, shooting off as a streak of light. The hot, moist night wind of the south blew past the crown of the trees. The trees swayed and rustled. "What did he say?" Little and asked. "Nothing much. Just a few words of advice. He's probably afraid I'll fall into the wrong path." "Is it useful? I've never liked to use my brain, and I can't think of complicated things like good and evil. I only know that I'll mess with whoever wants to mess with me, and I'll mess with whoever I don't like. In short, there's nothing wrong with becoming stronger." "How's that? Simple enough, right?" Li Qingshan had once struggled with the dual identity of a human and a demon. In the end, he understood that standing on his own side was always the right thing to do. He simply blurred out the various identities and did what he wanted to do. "Yes." Little and smiled faintly. Her ethereal eyes rippled with the moonlight, revealing her trust from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, she did not need to worry about good and evil, Buddha and the devil. She only needed to accompany him on a very simple path. "Let's go to the next demon Denver. Qingshan, if this continues, I might be one step ahead of you." Little and was confident that the accumulation of her Tao heart was already sufficient. All she lacked was resources. As long as she continued to devour and absorb, she would soon be able to cross that threshold and transcend the 3rd heavenly tribulation. That would be for the best, though I won't fall too far behind either. Li Qingshan knew he was currently fatigued after over a decade of valiant progress. Killing demon folk could be regarded as a form of relaxation. Little N, on the other hand, had built up her foundation, so there was a great opportunity for her to break through. However, no matter who broke through first, their strength would increase qualitatively. The wonders of the path of white bone and great beauty were probably no weaker than the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, let alone everything else. Just the skull prayer beads alone would allow her to continue refining them after undergoing the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Every single skeleton demon would possess the strength of a demon king. Even if they were extremely weak demon kings, they did not have so many tricks up their sleeves. However, when several dozen of them swarmed together and worked together, just who in the world could stop them? "Who's there?" Li Qingshan suddenly frowned and raised his head to bellow. An invisible wind swept out, and a depression appeared in the sea of trees, expanding in all directions. A mountain of clouds in the sky collapsed and dispersed, and a familiar figure appeared. "Divine Nun of the South Sea." "Master." The Divine Nun of the South Sea brought her palms together. She was still dressed in the same shabby, black robes as before. A sliver of sorrow and fury appeared on her plain and stern face as she stared straight at Little. "And, Divine Nun, why have you come? Why aren't you lending a hand when you're watching us purge the demons?" Li Qingshan found the situation rather troublesome, so he chose to strike first. "One will, just what cultivation method do you practice? Who are you exactly?" The Divine Nun of the South Sea did not answer his question, asking sternly instead. Little, and wanted to say something. An apologetic and sorrowful expression appeared on his face, but as soon as he met the Divine Nun of the South Sea's gaze, His expression melted like snow, recovering his expressionless appearance. He knew any explanation would be useless. At most, Yi Duanhai felt that this was an evil or demonic cultivation method, but as one of the few great Buddhist cultivators in the world, it was impossible for the divine Nun of the South Sea to not sense the disobedience and blasphemy towards the Buddhist Dharma. It was probably even more despicable than demon folk who could not distinguish right from wrong. Demon folk were only enemies, but she was a traitor of Buddhism, just like the white-bone bodhisattva. Nice. You've hidden yourself so well. We've been together for so many years, yet I actually failed to see through your true face, and I even wanted to take you in as my successor. The divine Nun of the South Sea laughed from extreme anger, feeling even more sorrowful. She had not come here by chance. She had specially searched for Little, and, although she had been busy suppressing the demon plague in the past 2 years, she still cared very much about this disciple of hers. She would go to Savage Mountain to look for him whenever she had the time. Although she was a step too late, she still managed to find him through the decree she had left on Little, and it was a prayer bead, similar to the one the unraging monk had given to Li Qingshan. Not only could it call for reinforcements, but it could also protect his life. It could unleash the precept of the 4 parts equivalent to her full strength. Even if she encountered a third heavenly tribulation opponent, she could block it for a while, allowing her to rush over and save him. Little and wanted to learn the Buddhist Dharma from the divine Nun of the South Sea, so she obviously could not accept it or remove it as she pleased. However, she never expected her to come at a time like this. After all, no matter how meticulous she was, it was impossible for her to calculate everything, let alone the fact that she was a great cultivator. Please calm down, Abbess. Little and didn't do it on purpose either. Li Qingshan shrugged. It was impossible for any secret to remain hidden forever, let alone his own strength. His identity as a demon was still a taboo to him many years ago, but now it had already leaked everywhere. A lot of people knew about it. Little N's avatar of white bone beneath her great beauty was no different. However, he did not find this to be a big deal. After all, Little N had not used mortals for cultivation. Just now, the battle had truly purged demons and defended the righteous path. However, he discovered very soon that he had still underestimated people of religion. Shut up, Li Qingshan. So many years have passed. Do you really think I know nothing? The Green Province isn't the Mist Province, and the Chan Monastery of Devanaga doesn't want demons either. Even the Golden Cicada Spirit King was expelled in the past, let alone you. Thank you for keeping my secret, Divine Nun. Li Qingshan clasped his hands. If it weren't for sigh, the divine Nun of the South Sea let out a sorrowful sigh. Originally, she wanted to say it was for the sake of Little, but she had touched her sore spot again. She had wandered the South Sea for many years. If it were not for Little N, who was considering how to accept her as a disciple, she would never have paid attention to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga 50,000 kilometers away. Although she had sensed that there was something off about Li Qingshan's identity, she did not find the bloodline of demons particularly unacceptable, as she came from the Mist Province. After all, even the bodhisattvas of the West had demons as mounts. It was a good thing for them to convert to Buddhism, since you can keep a secret for a demon like me, Abbess, then Little and can be regarded as a proper Buddhist disciple. Even if he secretly practices some demonic arts, he still has a good heart. Look, we just killed a demon king earlier. Li Qingshan did his best to defend Little, and not because he was afraid of the divine Nun of the South Sea, but because he felt very embarrassed. After all, the divine Nun of the South Sea had always treated Little and rather well. If she treated Little and well, then she treated him well. As a person who could clearly distinguish between kindness and grievances, he did not want to fall out with someone who had helped him. Shut up. Don't ever mention the words Buddhist disciple again. Our Buddhist school is vast, but we don't have a disciple like that. The divine nun of the South Sea pointed at Little and became stricter and stricter, radiating with an invisible pressure that made even Li Qingshan's breathing halt. That was not just power, but the spirit of a successor of laws as well. Can you still be reasonable? It's our fault for lying to you, but we also have our own difficulties. Can't killing a few demon kings and saving millions of lives make up for it? Before Little could answer, Li Qingshan called out, "Don't even think about it." "All right then. Today, I'll purge the demons and clean up the sect." A tattered Buddhist scripture appeared in the divine nun of the South Sea's hand. She began reciting it sternly. Her voice was ancient and awkward. The desire to guard against evil, the prohibition of the 4 demons, the path that transcends the world, no precepts, no grandeur. This is the essence of the 3 elements, the cave of all benevolence. The school of Vinaya isn't skilled in battle. It focuses more on restraining rather than directly injuring the enemy. The divine nun of the South Sea rarely clashed with others either. She's not even as powerful as the Thousand Tendrils King. If we work together, we should have over a 50% chance of killing her. Little communicated. The Buddha's slaying sword was already in her hand. Li Qingshan grabbed Little hand and pulled her behind him. "She's been very kind to you. Don't do anything. If we don't eliminate this person, there'll be endless problems in the future." Little could obviously understand what he was thinking. She could only understand what he was thinking. However, if they did not kill the divine nun of the South Sea today, their secret would definitely spread across the world. His plan to return to the Green Province would come to a premature end before it had even begun. We work hard to become stronger. Not only do we have to do what we want to do, but we also have to not do what we don't want to do. Leave this to me. I'll teach this old nun a lesson and make her wake up. Li Qingshan smiled at Little, and he did not blame her for her decision. However, he would not change his principles so easily for the sake of the pros and cons. Little nodded gently. She would support all of his decisions. At this moment, the divine nun of the South Sea's chanting became even louder. The entire region became solemn and solemn. Li Qingshan and Little were like 2 criminals awaiting the judge's verdict. However, Li Qingshan was not one to admit his guilt. He laughed aloud. "Divine nun, eat my punch first." Immediately, he turned into a scarlet streak of light and shot off. Precept of the 4 parts equals body of precepts. The halo behind the divine nun of the South Sea shone brightly as she pointed at Li Qing. Buddhist light enveloped him, and a string of prayer beads suddenly appeared in Li Qingshan's hand. He donned a set of monk's robes, and his scarlet hair drifted about. He completed the process of tonsure and ordination. Benevolence immediately filled his heart, repenting for all his malice. "Divine nun, don't forget that I'm also half a Buddhist disciple, nor do I have any intentions of harming you. I only hope that we can calm down and talk." Li Qingshan paused slightly before continuing on his way. His mind had been tempered in the clam king of Mirage Sea's illusions, and he had the spirit turtle to suppress his mind. The divine nun of the South Sea's techniques were profound, but they were not particularly effective against him. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before the divine nun of the South Sea and threw a punch. Precepts of the 4 parts equals precepts. The divine nun of the South Sea chanted as she formed a seal with her hands and swung them at Li Qingshan. Immediately, Li Qingshan felt his demon chi disperse. He could not even use the power of tremors. All of his abilities and techniques were useless. However, he agreed with little Anne's view more and more. The techniques of the school of Vinaya really were not suitable for open battles, especially in one-on-one battles. Even without abilities, his strength of the ox demon was nothing to be trifled with. It lacked some sharpness and murderousness, but the power was solid, without any falseness at all. In the nick of time, the divine nun of the South Sea took out a simple disciplinary ruler and swung it at Li Qingshan's head. If he were a regular great cultivator, he would be in danger of having his head splattered, but to Li Qingshan, even if he took it head-on, it would not be fatal. Just like what Little An said, the divine nun of the South Sea isn't even as great as the Demon King when it comes to killing. At this moment, a strange expression appeared on the divine nun of the South Sea's face. Her hand seal changed again, and she said sternly, "Precepts of the four parts equals precepts." Li Qingshan's body stiffened. He was immobilized, but he did not mind. The effects of the precepts would not last for too long. Even if he allowed the divine nun of the South Sea to attack him as she pleased, she would not even be able to rebirth him once. Chapter 945. Li Qingshan suddenly looked back, but all he saw was the divine nun of the South Sea lunging towards Little Anne. He never expected the divine nun of the South Sea's obsession to run so deep, but he was not too worried. The techniques of the school of Vinaya were extremely profound. With his current reactions and speed, he could only take them on and not dodge them. However, they also had fatal flaws. Firstly, they could only be used a limited number of times, and secondly, if they were forcefully broken through, the user would suffer a backlash. During the Battle of Firemelt Mountain in the past, Li Qingshan had praised the divine nun of the South Sea's methods, but he had also seen these two flaws extremely clearly. Just as Little An had said, the divine nun of the South Sea was not someone skilled in battle. Trapping him and using the opportunity to deal with Little An seemed clever, but Little An was no pushover either. Forcing her into battle would only hasten her defeat. Little An waved her hand gently, and a string of skull prayer beads flew out, turning into hideous skulls. The skulls burned with the samadhi flames of white bone, and their strange cackles were breathtaking. They circled around and assembled into the skeleton demon formation, protecting her in the center. Heretic path of evil, decree forbids. The divine nun of the South Sea bellowed out and immediately drowned out the skeleton demon's strange cackles. Wherever the golden light permeated, the skeleton demon seemed to sink into mud. The entire skeleton demon formation slowed down and stopped operating. The Buddhist Dharma is boundless, and the decree forbids demons. The divine nun of the South Sea tossed the scripture in her hand into the air, and it scattered into golden pages. They were as large as doors, surrounding Little An and closing in on her. Little An was unfazed. With a wave of the blood sea banner, a river of blood whistled out, rushing left and right to support the golden pages. Not only was it unrestrained by the Buddhist light, but the tainted blood splattered, and even the Buddhist light dimmed. Damned disciple! The divine nun of the South Sea became even more distressed. A disciplinary ruler suddenly appeared in her hand. It was made of bamboo and glossy black, with 3 words engraved on it, mind-binding as precepts. It did not seem particularly special, but it gave off an ancient and profound aura. It happened to be a Buddhist treasure. Abjuration! The divine nun of the South Sea raised her disciplinary ruler high into the air and suddenly spat out a single word. The ruler spat out a blinding radiance, bringing with it an incomparably merciful intent as it chopped down on Little Anne's head. Wherever the ruler went, the skeleton devil formation would immediately collapse. The surging river of blood was split into two, and its impetus was solemn and murderous. It was like a heavenly tribulation or divine punishment, and it wasn't inferior to the ocean-splitting sword at all. Kill! Little and brandished the Buddha's slaying sword. He infused all of his swordsmanship into this one strike, and it met the ruler. Clang! The ruler and the sword clashed. Master and disciple, face to face. They were so close, yet so far away. The divine Nun of the South Sea's face was filled with murderousness, grief, and fury, while little Anne's beauty faded away, returning to a skeleton that gave off no aura at all. The divine Nun of the South Sea was a strict person, and little Anne went without saying. Even in the decade or so she had spent wandering, she had rarely been so close to him. However, this act of intimacy was to kill him. The stalemate only lasted for a split second. Waves of air whistled out, and little Anne was sent flying as a result, falling into the sea of trees. With a great rumble, thousands of huge trees were destroyed, creating a huge pit. A soybean-sized nick appeared on the ruler, and a crack appeared on the Buddha slaying sword. Little Anne's current strength was still not enough to contend against the divine Nun of the South Sea, who had struck out in anger, but she did not need to fend for too long either. Right when the divine Nun of the South Sea was about to pursue him, she suddenly clutched her chest and grunted. A sweet taste appeared in her mouth. Li Qingshan shuddered and forcefully broke free from the divine Nun of the South Sea's discipline. Although he was not as powerful as the giant god of fire from Fire Melt Mountain back, then in terms of strength, the power of the discipline had weakened drastically when the divine Nun of the South Sea split off her attention to deal with little, and seeing how little and had been sent flying, Li Qingshan flew into a rage. "Old damn nun, you're looking to die?" He sucked in a deep breath and blew hard. A fierce gust of wind whistled out, twisting and coiling towards the divine Nun of the South Sea like a 100-kilometer-long snake. The tiger demon's breath. The divine Nun of the South Sea extended her hand and waved. The golden pages blocked behind her before raising the ruler and lunging towards Little and raised her head and looked over. She thought to herself, "Master, the pincer attack is complete. Just how long can you last?" She swung her right hand downwards, and skulls rushed towards the golden pages, biting down on every single page firmly. The gust of wind was no longer obstructed. It shot straight in, striking the divine Nun of the South Sea's back. The divine Nun of the South Sea seemed to be unaware. All she could see was Little, and she was filled with exasperated fury as she swung the ruler again. Boom! In a split second, the crater became several times larger and deeper. Thousands of towering trees fell like straws. At the bottom of the pit, Little Anne knelt on one knee. She held her sword with both hands, blocking the ruler. The cracks on her sword expanded, as if it could break at any time. The samadhi flames of white bone continued to burn quietly in her eye sockets. The fierce gust of wind descended, slamming into the divine Nun of the South Sea. Her black robes ruffled and ruffled as the protective light around her tottered. The wind left a bloody mark on her stern, withered face, but she did not seem to notice it at all. Even the wind was unable to drown out her furious bellow. "Damn disciple, why don't you kneel?" Little Anne could not hold on any longer. She fell to her knees as pale white flames flickered in her eye sockets. Even with her intelligence, she had never expected the divine Nun of the South Sea to kill her so recklessly. However, upon further thought, it was all because she practiced this cultivation method. "You're looking to die." Li Qingshan descended from the sky with the fierce gust of wind. He unfurled his wings to the limit, and his fist was completely enveloped in shock waves. He did not hold back at all with his strength and abilities, pushing them to the limit as he hurled them viciously towards the divine Nun of the South Sea's back. The divine Nun of the South Sea was not a demon king or demon king. Her body was not particularly tough. If the punch landed, her body would immediately collapse, and even her soul would be damaged. However, she seemed to have lost her mind. All she could see was little, and she had no intentions of dodging at all. Li Qingshan suddenly frowned. He changed his fist to a palm, dispersing the shock waves and withdrawing some of his strength. With a thump, the divine Nun of the South Sea vomited a mouthful of blood. It shone with golden light and landed on Little N's skeletal body, but it was immediately melted away by the samadhi flames of white bone. Little N swung her sword backwards, stabbing it towards the divine Nun of the South Sea's forehead. Right when the divine Nun of the South Sea was about to be beheaded, a huge hand extended over and grabbed the sword firmly. Little N glanced at Li Qingshan, and Li Qingshan shook his head gently. He let go of the Buddha slaying sword. Divine Nun, you're not our opponent. Originally, we should have killed you today, but for the sake of Little N's kindness, we'll spare you. Don't oppose us anymore. Li Qingshan obviously understood this, but the crux of the issue was when he should be tolerant and when he should be resolute. The heavily injured divine Nun of the South Sea was no longer a threat. This should have been the perfect opportunity to kill her, but he clearly separated his debts of gratitude and grievances. Even if there were endless troubles in the future, he was unwilling to go against his conscience. One will, oh, one will. We've been together for over a decade, and you even remember a demon, yet you're so vicious and heartless. Blood flowed from the divine Nun of the South Sea's mouth as she stared straight at Little N. Her face was filled with sorrow. Little Anne's attack had failed to harm her, but the coldness and heartlessness it revealed had deeply wounded her heart. Li Qingshan saw this and could not help but sigh, but he understood extremely well that Little Anne was not vicious. Instead, she was heartless and emotionless. Hasn't Master always praised my temperament? Little Anne said calmly. During the years she traveled with the divine Nun of the South Sea, she had experienced many worldly entanglements, but she had always remained unfazed and untainted, which earned the divine Nun of the South Sea's admiration. She felt this was the bearing a disciple of the school of Vinaya should possess. I was wrong. How can heartless people have a heart of benevolence? The divine Nun of the South Sea suddenly changed the topic. Whatever. One will, from today onwards, I'll formally accept you as my direct disciple. You'll inherit my legacy. Are you willing? Li Qingshan was slightly taken aback. The old nun sure had changed her attitude quickly. Was she going to try to appease him now that the forceful approach had failed? He found this to be rather inappropriate, but he immediately dismissed his doubts. With him present, even if the divine Nun of the South Sea wanted to drag them down with her, she would not be able to. At most, she would allow him to undergo Nerva once. If the divine Nun of the South Sea wanted to die that much, then that would be perfect. He would definitely not stop her. However, she would not be so unwise, so he nodded at Little and I'm willing. Little and brought her palms together and lowered her head. Since he did not want to kill the divine Nun of the South Sea, she could keep the secret by easing their relationship. All right. The divine Nun of the South Sea laughed. The sorrow on her face suddenly vanished, and she recovered her solemn expression. She extended her skinny right hand and placed it on Little N's head. I'll pass on the cultivation method of the school of Vinaya to you now. After passing on the cultivation method, the divine Nun of the South Sea said, the appearance has form, and you can distinguish it by looking at it. The first is the law of the precepts, which describes its function. The second is the body of the precepts, which only discusses its nature. The third is the practice of the precepts, which briefly shows your cultivation. If you don't distinguish the appearance, you won't know a single thing about the law, the body, or the practice. So why is that? The law has no other law, but the appearance is the law. The body has no other body, but the appearance is the body. The practice has no other actions, but the appearance is the movement. Suddenly, Li Qingshan felt uneasy. He saw the divine, none of the South Sea's skinny right hand suddenly turn into golden liquid that flowed down. At a closer glance, the golden liquid was condensed from countless Sanskrit characters, as thin as dust, directly seeping into the white bone. Little and suddenly gripped the Buddha slaying sword, but he was unable to move. Li Qingshan had already taken a step forward and grabbed the divine, nun of the South Sea's wrist. Divine nun, we've already come so far. So what tricks do you still want to play? He clenched his other hand into a fist. He had made up his mind. If she continued to be stubborn, he would no longer show any mercy. I know I'm not your opponent alone, and I don't have any tricks to play. However, since she's my disciple, I will take responsibility for her until the very end. One will, just what kind of demonic art did you use to turn you into something like this? Let go. Li Qingshan threw a punch, directly piercing the divine, none of the South Sea's body, but it did not feel like he had struck something solid. The divine, none of the South Sea was as calm as before, without the slightest pain. There was even a sense of transcendence, as if she had attained enlightenment. Our fate as master and disciple has come to an end. Although it's only for a moment, I believe this is the benevolence of the Buddha allowing me to redeem you. In the future, you must inherit the precepts and devote yourself to the Buddha. When she reached there, she suddenly shone brightly, turning into countless golden Sanskrit characters that surged towards Little, and she poured all of her cultivation into her body, as if her white bone was coated with a layer of dazzling gold. This was a sarira, as well as a precept, a form of restriction. The disciplinary ruler fell to the ground, and the pages drifted down, combining into a scripture and landing before Little, and Li Qingshan picked her up and asked in concern, "Are you fine? What did the old nun do?" Chapter 946. Li Qingshan asked, "Then what's she doing?" Little and raised her right hand. It glistened like it was forged from gold. The pale white, transparent samadhi flames of white bone radiated out, turning back into flesh and blood. Her originally rosy white face seemed rather pale now, and the new skin was deeply imprinted with golden Sanskrit, as if it was something she was born with. She tried to use the path of white bone and great beauty, and the golden Sanskrit immediately shone with a warm Buddhist light, suppressing the white bone sarira she had obtained through arduous cultivation. She stammered, "She suppressed my path of white bone and great beauty, wanting me to switch to the cultivation method of the school of Vinaya. She went as far as to sacrifice her life just for that." Li Qingshan was slightly stunned. He struggled to understand the old nun's thoughts. Just how precious was the life and cultivation of a great cultivator? How could she give it up so easily just so that her disciple could switch to a different cultivation method? Yeah, isn't it hilarious? I tricked her for over a decade, and she even gave up her life in the end, channeling her cultivation into my body. As long as I give up on the path of white bone and great beauty and switch to the cultivation method of the school of Vinaya, I'll be able to undergo the third heavenly tribulation easily. He, Little and laughed gently, but Li Qingshan was unable to laugh. He could also tell that there was no laughter in her voice at all. Instead, there was a hint of pain and bewilderment in her clear eyes. Over a decade of time, and space suddenly flooded back. Her pale memories were suddenly dyed with various colors, deeply engraved in them. Li Qingshan suddenly understood that the divine nun of the South Sea did not just want her to switch to a different cultivation method. She also wanted her to have a heart. However, with a heart came regret, struggle, and pain. He embraced her firmly in his arms. It's not like it's your fault. That old nun was the one who thought too highly of herself. Qingshan, let's go to the next demon cavern. If this continues, my samadhi flames of white bone will be extinguished. Little and suddenly grabbed his hand firmly. Her expression was conflicted, but it was mostly filled with determination. The countless golden Sanskrit characters had seeped deeply into her bones, wanting to completely cripple her path of white bone and great beauty. You think it's settled? No matter what path you want to take, I will support you. Li Qingshan's feelings were rather mixed. He was not just shocked by the divine nun of the South Sea's sacrifice. Was little N's sacrifice any less? Unable to appreciate any beautiful scenery, unable to taste the taste of delicacies, everything was for the sake of cultivation, and then risking life and death again and again to help him fight against powerful enemies, sacrificing more than just one life. If there was a chance, she would be able to regain these feelings. Even if it was just that ignorant little brat from back then, wasn't it good for her? Stupid Qingshan, don't think of leaving me behind again. Little and extended a hand and stroked his cheek. No matter how profound the cultivation method of the school of Vinaya was, how could it compare to the path of white bone and great beauty that came from beyond the 9 heavens? How am I supposed to keep up with him? Holding the Buddhist scripture and the disciplinary ruler in his hands, he opened his mouth and said, "I'm sorry, master." Humph, I still don't like you that much. Good days and bad days will come with me. Li Qingshan curled his lip. He unfurled his phoenix wings and kicked up a fierce gust of wind, whistling through the air. Is there a demon cavern over there? Little N asked. How are you supposed to fight with me in your current state? Find a place and get some proper rest first. I'll deal with the demon folk. I'll definitely feed you until you're full. Little N agreed and concentrated on circulating the path of white bone and great beauty, doing his best to fend off the invasion of the countless golden Sanskrit characters. In the myriad poison cult, the pavilions, terraces, and buildings remained the same, giving off a gloomy and mysterious aura. However, they were covered in a layer of the dust of time. Under the illumination of the setting sun, they seemed especially desolate and cold. Ru Xian sat in the pill cauldron and cultivated. She was as warm and translucent as white jade, becoming even purer and flawless. Suddenly, she sensed something and stood up, leaving the hall and raising her head. A streak of resplendent scarlet light tore through the air and landed on the stone square with a boom. Over a decade had passed. Meeting an old friend again, Ru Xian could not help but smile. What's the hurry? Are you being hunted down again? What's wrong with little Anne? Li Qingshan did not have the luxury of time. He handed little Anne to Ru Xian carefully. Help me take care of her. Ru Xian's arms sank. Her body that was supposed to be as light as a feather actually became as heavy as metal. The golden Sanskrit characters lined her skin solemnly, filled with an inviolable, unshakable solemnity. Along the way, Li Qingshan had tried to help little and suppress the golden Sanskrit characters, but they had already completely merged with her body and even her mind. Little and had studied the Buddhist Dharma for many years. Although she had gone there with the exact opposite intentions, she had already comprehended the various essences of the Buddhist Dharma. Anyone who could comprehend to her level was an eminent monk of Buddhism who had achieved complete enlightenment. She was only able to maintain her emotionless attitude due to the influence of the path of white bone and great beauty. Once this tranquility was shattered, How could she not have a heart towards the Buddha and the desire for salvation? How could the white bone bodhisattva not have a heart towards the Buddha and the desire for salvation? What made her waver was not the divine nun of the South Sea, but the Buddha in her heart. Li Qingshan glanced at little and deeply again. Without saying anything else, he turned around and flew off. Ru Xian reacted quickly, grabbing him by the shoulder. What's going on exactly? Your cultivation has progressed rather quickly, but if I didn't stop, your hand would have been ripped off. Li Qingshan came to a halt. He was rather surprised. Although he had not purposefully dodged, just the grab alone demonstrated that she had not wasted the past decade or so. All right. Uncle Li, you're so full of yourself. We as young cultivators admire you. Please tell us just what's going on. Uncle Li? Ru Xian curled her lip. Who would just toss someone aside like that? You can just ask little and for the details. If she's willing to talk to me, and if I'm willing to talk to her, I can obviously ask her. Ru Xian glanced at little and in her arms. She was also a clever person. Back in the 100 schools of thought, she could already tell that little and was different. When this girl looked at people, she was no different from looking at an object. She would never try to warm up to someone who gave her the cold shoulder. Sister Ru Xian, I'm willing to talk to you. You can ask me. Shaoan stuttered. Ru Xian was immediately taken aback. As she gazed at the delicate young lady in her arms, she actually felt like she could not help but pity her. What the hell? This was also the reason why she did not want to have too much contact with this little girl. It was obviously not the art of charm, but it was even scarier than that. After getting along with her for a long time, she could not help but be tempted. Did you hear that? I'll be back soon. Where are you going? What are you doing? The Devil's Den. Hunting. Li Qingshan was about to fly away, but he heard little and say again, the South Sea. Li Qingshan was slightly stunned, but then he nodded to show that he understood. The wind whistled, and in the blink of an eye, he broke through the sunset and flew to the South Sea. He really trusts me. After all, you're his treasure. Ru Xian couldn't help but reach out and pinch little Anne's face. She had a kind of joy of taking advantage of someone in danger. Tell me, how do you want me to take care of you? Are you sick? Let go. Little Anne stared at Ru Xian unhappily. Chapter 947. Li Qingshan flapped his wings with all his might, gathering strong winds as he flew faster and faster. Not long after, he arrived at the edge of the continent. The sparkling waves appeared before his eyes, vast and boundless. He had arrived at the South Sea. His eyes lit up and his mind opened up. He flew even faster until he reached the depths of the South Sea. He folded his wings and dove into the sea. The magnificent crystal palace stood in the depths of the sea with merpeople coming and going. Suddenly, the merpeople looked up and saw a scarlet light falling from the surface of the sea. In an instant, it stretched into a scarlet line and disappeared into the abyss behind the crystal palace. At the bottom of the abyss, the mermaid queen was cultivating. She held the heart of the abyss in her mouth and communicated with the distant ruins of End. She allowed the cold and quiet feeling to fill her mind, and threads of deep, cold power spread throughout her body. The ice crystal accessories on her body were all dyed in a layer of dark black, and even her mermaid silk dress had similarly changed color, adding a bit of a silent and mysterious temperament to her originally cold and noble appearance, making one unable to look directly at her. Suddenly, she sensed something and opened her eyes. She frowned slightly and asked coldly, "Why have you come?" "Why? Is Her Majesty not welcoming me? I remember that I almost became the son-in-law of the Crystal Palace." Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed, completely ignoring the queen's majesty that she was emitting intentionally or unintentionally. Cut the crap. Why have you come? Gong Yuan closed her eyes again. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Li Qingshan walked towards her. Gong Yuan snorted coldly. He suddenly felt a bone-piercing chill, as if countless swords were stabbing at him, forcing him to stop. However, the surrounding seawater did not freeze. Li Qingshan was secretly amazed. Sure enough, her cultivation had advanced even further. However, he had no intentions of stopping. He arrived before her against the coldness and extended his hands, placing them on her icy cold shoulders. He said with an extremely sincere gaze, "Help me out." Gong Yuan's body trembled slightly. In her thousands of years of cultivation, there was only one man who could get close to her, and he was the only one who dared to touch her, and scrupulously. However, after experiencing countless hugs and cuddles, she seemed to be able to accept such a slight offense. However, anger suddenly surged in her heart. She opened her eyes and said, "Why? Where were you when I needed your help?" Didn't I help you take down Fire Melt Mountain? Even if you want to dual cultivate, I'll cooperate." Li Qingshan had no idea where her anger had come from. "Then I'll have no more value, right?" Gong Yuan sneered. The memory of the empty seat from more than 10 years ago was still fresh in her mind, and it made her feel bitterly disappointed. "Why do you say that?" Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. He didn't understand where her anger came from. He had completely forgotten the banquet more than 10 years ago. Even if he remembered it, he wouldn't think it was a big deal. "So what value do you have that you can use now that the King of Savages has come in person?" Li Qingshan was rather confused, but at the very least he understood one thing, which was that the queen was very unhappy. If he asked her to help him purge demons right now, it would definitely fail, and she just happened to be the best helper for this matter. Demon kings were not that easy to deal with, especially the demon kings that guarded the edge of demon caverns. Defeating them was already very difficult, and killing them was even more difficult. During the battle against the Thousand Tendrils King, if it were not for Yi Duanhai weakening him first and Little and launching a sneak attack from behind, it was basically impossible for Li Qingshan to succeed alone. Every single demon king had gone through countless storms of blood in order to grow up as a regular demon folk. The cruel and harsh environment had determined the battle prowess of demon kings. They were much greater than regular great cultivators and demon kings of the 9 provinces, and they were cunning and vigilant. They were definitely not prey that waited to be hunted obediently. When Li Qingshan said he was going hunting, he was obviously full of lofty sentiments, but he needed a powerful helper. In this aspect, Gong Yuan was the best choice, whether it be in terms of strength, ability, or teamwork. Little and had hinted at the 2 words South Sea after careful consideration. However, a woman's heart was unfathomable, let alone the merfolk queen whose heart was as deep as the ocean. No matter how clever Little and was, it was impossible for him to guess her attitude. He needed Li Qingshan to come up with a solution himself. Faced with Gong Yuan's sneering question, Li Qingshan sniggered and pulled her into his arms forcefully. He lowered his head and kissed her. Gong Yuan's eyes widened. This time, she was not in a state of dual cultivation. Instead, she was filled with vigilance. She opened her mouth slightly and spat out a stream of coldness. That was the purest power of Ruin's end. Let alone his mouth. Even Li Qingshan's entire face had lost all feeling, so the kiss obviously ended in failure. However, the strength of the ox demon was nothing to scoff at. He forcefully pulled her into his arms. She was not as cold as he imagined her to be. In particular, there was a slightly warm and soft feeling between his chest and abdomen. Ignoring the bone-chilling coldness that permeated his body, he said gently, "This is where I want to use you. I've been trapped on Fire Melt Mountain these past few years, or I would have come to the South Sea a long time ago to make good use of you. What a pity, what a pity. Trapped. Gong Yuan had already made up her mind to teach him a painful lesson so that he would understand the price of offending her time and time again, but when she heard that word, she could not help but pause despite circulating the all-water to ruins and at full strength. Yeah, it's all because of that feng shiwu. It's that divine wudong tree that almost trapped me for over 1,000 years. Li Qingshan silently circulated the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to stabilize her emotions. Sure enough, the innate compatibility between the two cultivation methods immediately gave Gong Yuan a sense of peace. After cultivating alone for over a decade, the inner demons that had been subdued began to stir again. Why? Gong Yuan asked. She temporarily dismissed the idea of attacking him, because after calmly considering it, she still needed this bastard to increase her cultivation, and she needed his power to develop her race. She needed to endure the humiliation for the greater good. She could not fall out with him. However, these reasons just seemed like excuses she found for herself, and she could not explain why she was so furious when she saw him earlier. Yeah, that's hard to say, but since you want to hear it, Li Qingshan said hesitantly, if you don't want to say it, then forget it. Don't come up with some lies to trick me. Gong Yuan interrupted him coldly. Can't you sense whether I'm tricking you or not? Li Qingshan just opened up his heart and entered a state of dual cultivation. Under this state, their minds could connect with each other without the slightest lie or deception. Perhaps this was why basically all those who dual cultivated would become partners of cultivation. All sentient beings yearned for the existence of a person like that. The path of cultivation was lonely, but it was not because cultivators were born to walk alone. Gong Yuan hesitated, but she still failed to resist the temptation. The moment their minds connected, her heart skipped a beat compared to her cold, silent heart. His heart would always be so blazing, filled with desire and ambition, as well as the fearlessness to do whatever he wanted. How do I say this? I have a son. As soon as Li Qingshan said that, the entire sea abyss froze over. Chapter 948. In the myriad poison cult, Little An leaned on her sword with her right hand and held a seal with her left as she sat in the main seat of the hall. Pale white flames burned in the depths of her eyes, as if they were about to erupt, but they were suppressed by the Buddhist light. She did her best to maintain her composure, just like the surface of water, but below the surface was already surging. The corner of her eyes changed slightly, like she was in pain, like she was filled with regret, like she was constantly struggling. The resplendent, swaying, golden Buddhist light illuminated the gloomy hall. Ru Xian gazed on from afar and was surprised. Just what is this cultivation method? Why does it give off the presence of a monk king? If the path of white bone and great beauty did not originate from Buddhism, then it would have been completely crippled a long time ago under the divine, none of the South Sea's overwhelming power. However, the white bone bodhisattva who created this cultivation method had originally gone from Buddhism to the demonic. She had rejected everything about Buddhism from a spiritual perspective, and she had just hunted down countless demon folk as resources, which was why she could last until now. Her emotions were mixed up, and even her memories from even earlier surged. She missed a certain face, the person called Mother. When she thought up to there, she basically lost control as tears rolled down her cheeks. Are you fine? Ru Xian saw this and felt her heart ache for some reason. How could she not feel pained when she saw this tear-stained beauty? However, she composed herself very soon. This girl was not to be trifled with. Little An gazed at Ru Xian through her hazy eyes, as if she could read her thoughts. Then she asked gently, as if she was rather embarrassed, Big Sister Ruexian, can I eat you? No, you can. Ruexian shivered inside, not because of the coldness of the question, but because in that moment she actually felt an urge to agree. Although she did not know what had happened to her body, after she gained natural emotions and expressions, the power of her charm seemed to have multiplied. Fortunately, she cultivated the heavenly tome of cloud furnace and had a heart of stone, which was why she was able to resist it. How stingy, little and pouted like a child who did not get her candy. Sorry, I'm very hard to eat. Ruexian faked a smile, but found that her eyes gradually became clear. There seemed to be a flash of light in her eyes, as if she had understood something. This may be an opportunity, little and murmured with a hint of determination, which reminded Ruexian of Li Qingshan. The best resource for practicing the path of white bone and great beauty was actually not the demon hearts of demon folk, but the sariras of Buddhist cultivators. It was just like how one had to study the Buddhist Dharma in order to comprehend the mysteries of the path of white bone and great beauty. From a certain perspective, this was a Buddhist cultivation method. The divine Nun of the South Sea's lifetime of cultivation was definitely not poison to her. Instead, it was perfect nourishment. It could even give her the opportunity to experience the white bone bodhisattva's process of falling from Buddhism to the demonic, allowing her to gain an even deeper comprehension of the path of white bone and great beauty. However, the prerequisite for all of this was that her path of white bone and great beauty could not be completely crippled. This required tremendous resources, which was why he asked Ruexian whether she could eat her or not. It was only after thinking this through that she eased up. Her revenge prank had been deeply influenced by Li Qingshan's vile interests. Qingshan, come back quickly. Little and Ruexian thought at the same time. At that moment, Li Qingshan did not just feel coldness, but also murderousness. He never expected Gong Yuan to react so drastically when she heard that he had a son. He thought, don't tell me this ice woman is interested in me. My charm sure is hard to resist. However, his narcissistic thoughts came to an end as the murderousness grew heavier and heavier. It was about to become actual killing intent. Wait, he's not my biological son. He's my godson, my godson. Godson, Gong Yuan asked. As a result, Li Qingshan explained the whole story. Gong Yuan was surprised as well. Phoenixes actually still existed in this world, and the divine Wudong tree had actually trapped him in the phoenix's nest for the sake of hatching the phoenix's embryo. He had actually succeeded. If it were not for the fact that their minds were connected, she definitely would have treated this as a story that he had made up. However, the frozen sea abyss showed no signs of thawing. What? Are you still dissatisfied with something? Li Qingshan asked. Do you know what conduct they despise the most among the merfolk? Gong Yuan said coldly. It's probably everything the fire devourers do. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes. It's the heartless, fickle scoundrels. If you were all alone, then so be it, but you once said you're already engaged, so you shouldn't be so wanton and casual. It makes me look down on you. Gong Yuan grabbed Li Qingshan's hand around her waist and pulled it away forcefully, pressing it against Li Qingshan's chest. With a firm push, the ice shattered loudly. Li Qingshan nodded and rubbed his chin. That's quite reasonable, but what you're implying is that if I'm not engaged or if I'm involved with another woman, you can do whatever you want of me? That's not necessarily impossible, but unfortunately, you'll never be able to do it. In this aspect, even the fire devourer that my sister is fond of is much better than you. Gong Yuan sneered in disdain. Forget it. Even if you're willing, why wouldn't I be willing? Even if a man is infatuated with you, just how much sincerity can you give me? You have to consider your own cultivation. You have to consider the development of the merfolk of the South Sea, And even your dignity as a queen is more important than that man. Isn't that fickle? You're not your sister, pursuing true love or whatever is just wishful thinking. Li Qingshan laughed aloud, shaking up the abyssal sea. Originally, he thought Gong Yuan would fly into a rage, but he never expected her to actually reveal an extremely rare smile after a moment of thought, although there was also a hint of a sigh. You're right. I'll never be infatuated with someone like my sister. I really don't have the right to request anything from others. She said sternly, that's why let's cut to the chase. Let's talk about how we can make use of each other. What do you want me to do? Help me purge the demons and kill a few demon kings. Li Qingshan smiled, revealing his fangs. What do I get in return? Gong Yuan shivered inside. The demon plague of the Mist Province was extremely powerful, and fighting demon kings was even more dangerous. The king of Southern Yu's estate had asked her time and time again, but she had turned them all down. There's nothing at all. Li Qingshan laid out his hands. Li Qingshan, are you messing with me? Gong Yuan squeezed that out from between her teeth. If there's nothing in return, then it's not making use of each other. Li Qingshan stared straight into her eyes. Just treat it as a favor from a friend. Is that all right? Gong Yuan was mildly surprised. She avoided his gaze and sank into her thoughts for a while. Seeing as you'll still be of some use in the future, I'll help you out this time. Remember this kindness well and return it tenfold in the future. After a pause, she added, also, we're not friends. Sigh. I know you want to be my wife. Li Qingshan murmured rather narcissistically. What did you say? Nothing. All right, Your Majesty. I'll do as you say. Time waits for no one. Let's set off. Gong Yuan returned to the Crystal Palace and gave a few instructions before hurrying off to the Mist Province with Li Qingshan. Along the way, Li Qingshan asked, Do you know Yi Weiyang? Who doesn't know the Shadow Queen? Why don't we call her again? That'll give us a better chance. Originally, Li Qingshan was considering going to the Shadow Palace to find Yi Weiyang if Gong Yuan refused to help him. This king of assassins from the Mist Province was also an extremely powerful helper. It was just that she would have to bleed a little, but as long as she could help little and get through this, it was nothing. Then go ask her. I'll return to the south, see myself. Gong Yuan came to a halt and said coldly, although they were all godfolk, the conflict between the 7 ancient divine kingdoms ran extremely deep. The fire devourers and mere people were not the only ones with deep grievances. For example, the accumulated grievances between the giant lumberfolk and the fire-devouring folk were no less than the former. Mere people and night roamers were both dominated by women, but that did not mean they could be friends happily. Night roamers were renowned for their fondness for scheming, purposefully inciting war among the various races in order to benefit from it. In the end, they could achieve their objective of weakening the 6 other divine kingdoms. Of course, it was not just night roamers who had this ambition. As a result, the various divine kingdoms had always been a place where kings did not meet kings. As soon as they did, there would be war. Although Gong Yuan loathed Li Qingshan's carelessness, she could not help but admit that she did trust Li Qingshan. This guy could clearly distinguish between kindness and grievances, and he was straightforward. He was especially reliable in dangerous battles, helping her block fatal attacks more than once. And there was an old saying from ancient times that even dead night roamers were not worthy of trust. Yeah, I've considered it. I feel like working together is enough. Li Qingshan immediately changed his mind. If there was free and useful labor, who would pay for it? Gong Yuan's face eased up slightly, and she caught up to Li Qingshan again, only to hear him shake his head and sigh. Sure enough, there are no women who aren't jealous. What did you say? Nothing. Dark clouds filled the sky, sweeping over from the south, and rushing through the demonic clouds condensed from demon chi. Afterwards, heavy snow fell. This was a rare sight in the Mist Province. The demon folk all raised their heads. A beautiful hexagonal snowflake drifted through the air and landed on the tip of a demon folk's nose. The demon folk only felt the tip of his nose turn cold before losing all of his senses, turning into a translucent ice sculpture. Enemy, the demon folk on the side, only called out that word before following in his footsteps. The snowflakes seemed to be intelligent. None of them landed on the ground, drifting towards the demon folk one by one. Coldness permeated the air. The thick mist turned into a layer of frost, and the noisy demon cavern became cold and silent. The demon commanders all demonified, but they did not launch an attack. Instead, they turned around and fled towards the demon cavern. However, above the demon cavern, the snowflakes rapidly gathered and stuck together, turning into a huge snowman. The snowman did not seem terrifying. As a matter of fact, it was rather simple and adorable. A smile hung on its round head, but with a casual swing of its round fist, it sent 2 demon commanders flying. A black spirit turtle hovered in the thick, snowy clouds. Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan were in there, working together to power the heart of the abyss. The snowman is pretty cute. Li Qingshan glanced at Gong Yuan in surprise. The snowman's strength had nothing to do with its appearance. It was completely controlled by the caster. He never thought she would have such a normal side to her. These demon folk are only used to probe the reactions of the various factions in the 9 provinces. How can they be considered a true demon disaster? Gong Yuan said, the god folk were far more experienced with dealing with demon folk than the humans and demons. The snowman is pretty cute. That's enough from you. At this moment, there was a boom, and the snowman collapsed, scattering into the air as snowflakes. Chapter 949. Instantly, demonic aura surged into the sky, sweeping away all the snow in the sky. A burly man stepped out of the deep demonic cavern, causing the ground to tremble. His ferocious-looking face was filled with rage. He never expected someone to kill him right after he returned to the demonic domain, causing him to lose so many subordinates. Who are you? Tell me your name. As the wind and snow blew, the burly man glared and let out a thunderous roar. His voice pierced through the snowstorm and charged into the sky, blasting a huge hole in the thick snow clouds. A black spirit turtle formed from the power of ruins and appeared. And who are you? Li Qingshan stopped joking around. This demon king's aura was even stronger than the 1,000 Tendrils kings. Furthermore, it was obvious that he was skilled in close combat. It would probably be difficult to defeat him in a one-on-one battle, let alone kill him. You dare to seek death without knowing who I am? You're here to slay demons, right? The martial chief king is here. Don't hide. Get down here and die. With a roar, the martial chief king's body transformed rapidly. His muscles swelled up, twisting like yellow snakes. Demonic aura surged around him, each wave stronger than the one before. Li Qingshan's frown deepened. He never expected to encounter such a powerful opponent on his second trip. However, he was eager to try. The martial chief king completed his demonic transformation, but his figure did not change much. He only became extremely muscular, reminding Li Qingshan of the bodybuilders from his previous life. However, this person's figure was even more fit. He looked rather disgusting, but he did not dare to underestimate him. Should I attack? Gong Yuan still did not know why Li Qingshan had come to wipe out the demons. Li Qingshan said that he wanted to be a hero that saved the world, so she naturally scoffed at him. Of course. Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes seemed to burn as he stared at the martial chief king below. It won't be easy to defeat him. Even if we win, he'll escape back to the demonic domain. Gong Yuan analyzed calmly. As long as we can force him to escape, we'll have won half the battle. Leave the rest to me. I'm coming. Hammer! Demonic chi surged under the martial chief king's feet and soared into the sky. From 5 kilometers away, he punched out. Demonic chi surged and roared as it condensed into a giant black hammer. The spikes on the hammer were the size of a small mountain. It tore through the air with a momentum that could smash everything in its path. Wherever it went, the snowy clouds would scatter, revealing wisps of light. This demonic killer move was dyed with a glorious aura. Li Qingshan was eager to give it a try. He loved to fight with this kind of opponent the most. He wanted to see whose fist was more ruthless and whose bones were harder. The tiger fong at his waist made a clanging sound. He almost wanted to abandon Gong Yuan and fight with all his might alone. If you want to fight alone, why are you looking for me? Gong Yuan said coldly. Li Qingshan calmed his mind and stabilized the tiger demon. Little and was still waiting. Now was not the time to pursue a satisfying battle. He had to win. Then it's up to you, your majesty. Ice Palace. Gong Yuan waved the ice scepter. Traces of ruins and power surged and flowed. The ice condensed into a grand and majestic ice palace. It was like a miniature version of the Crystal Palace. It emitted surging cold mist and stood above the clouds like an unreachable palace in the heavens. Boom! The ice palace shook violently. Icicles flew everywhere. The giant hammer smashed a deep depression in the ice palace's main entrance. Cracks climbed up the surrounding ice walls, but there was no time to repair them. The martial chief king took a step forward with his left foot and traversed 5 kilometers. He stood in front of the ice palace. Axe. His right foot kicked out. Demonic chi surged and transformed into a giant siege axe. He smashed the ice palace's entrance with one strike. Nice! Li Qingshan was impressed by the martial chief king's might and dominance. He couldn't help but praise. He thought, if I attack with all my strength, although I can also break the ice palace, I can't do it as easily and casually as he did. Every move, every punch, and every kick has such might. The demonic domain dares to attack the 9 provinces. They are indeed filled with experts. Just whose side are you on? Gong Yuan glared at him. Your side, of course. But this ice palace of yours is just for show. Li Qingshan said, it's still too early for me to break through the ice palace. Gong Yuan said confidently, seal the doors. There was no palace that only had a single door. With Gong Yuan's order, the ice crystal doors were sealed shut. Humph, you're like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Hammer, axe, saber, spear. The martial chief king advanced step by step. Demonic chi surged from every part of his body, turning into terrifying demonic weapons. They rampaged about, destroying the ice crystal doors one after another. He barged into the ice palace and charged straight at the dark spirit tortoise. Nice one. Retreat. Li Qingshan was just about to go up against him when Gong Yuan grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and retreated, leaving the ice palace. The martial chief king charged into the center of the ice palace, where the spirit tortoise had originally been. Lock the palace. Gong Yuan sneered. She clenched her right hand, and the ice palace rapidly shrank. Ice pressed back towards the martial chief king from all directions. In the blink of an eye, the ice palace had been reduced to the size of a room. It locked up the martial chief king firmly, immobilizing him. Gong Yuan glanced at Li Qingshan in disdain. You 2 boorish fellows. Don't underestimate boorish fellows. Li Qingshan shook his head and pointed. The martial chief king's muscles that were as tough as cuticle began to twist and tremble, which seemed particularly disgusting and terrifying. Tremendous demon chi rapidly compressed and gathered. Gong Yuan's face changed, and the martial chief king bellowed out, "Shatter!" Demon chi erupted loudly, turning into over 100 different demonic weapons. They ripped through the ice and turned into ice dust, but the martial chief king vanished. Spirit Turtle's profound shell. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. Hexagonal pieces of the Spirit Turtle's profound shell scattered, condensing into a stable sphere around the dark Spirit Tortoise. Boom! The moment the sphere condensed, a large portion of it immediately cracked. It was the result of the martial chief king's punch. The muscles on his face had basically crushed his eyes to the point where they shone with brutal light. In the chaotic demon territory, there were conspiracies and betrayals everywhere. There were all sorts of strange methods. Even the original creator of the demon heart might not know what kind of fruit it would bear if the demon heart was used as a seed. Under these circumstances, the martial chief king cast aside all tricks and transformations, pushing his body to the limit, only leaving behind the simplest and most direct usage of demon chi. He killed countless enemies and became a demon king, basically becoming synonymous with violence. I really want to go 300 rounds with him. Li Qingshan's tone was like a pervert who had encountered a naked beauty. It was not just his hands that were itching. His entire body was itching. It made Gong Yuan frown. She had actually developed a sliver of a good impression of this bastard. She even felt like it would be nice to have him as her cultivation partner. Her head had basically been frozen. "Coward, watch as I shatter your turtle shell." The martial chief king's muscles swelled and twisted. Gong Yuan's ice palace trap did not seem to consume him at all. His presence became more and more violent, and he suddenly shuddered. Boom, boom, boom. The snowy clouds in the sky were dispersed, and sunlight poured down, but the martial chief king's figure was nowhere to be seen. All he saw were huge weapons rapidly flashing and disappearing, crisscrossing with one another. It was like the head of a monster composed of various weapons, chewing and tearing at something with everything it had. Every time it bit down, there would be a thunderous rumble. Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan were in the huge beast's mouth. Even with Gong Yuan's coldness and poise, she could not help but frown slightly. She had powered the heart of the abyss with all her strength, and the spirit turtle's profound shell supported by the power of ruins end was especially tough, but it was already riddled with cracks, and they were constantly spreading. Under the martial chief king's frenzied attacks, she actually felt like she was unable to fight back. Not only had her presence been suppressed, but she was also afraid to split her attention to attack, or the spirit turtle's profound shell would immediately collapse. Li Qingshan understood that if it were not for Gong Yuan, the spirit turtle's profound shell would have shattered over a dozen times already. It had been quite some time since he had used the spirit turtle's profound shell in battle. It was not because the spirit turtle transformation was not powerful enough, but because the ox demon transformation and tiger demon transformation had both reached the 5th layer. Offense was far more advantageous than defense. Their current strategy of defense was not wrong either. If the martial chief king were a little weaker, then they would be invincible with the endless power of ruins and that the heart of the abyss absorbed. If the spirit turtle transformation reached the 5th layer, then they could achieve absolute defense too. However, the martial chief king's destructive power was far beyond their expectations. Actually, in terms of cultivation, he was only around the same level as Gong Yuan, but his battle prowess was slightly higher, and he was not restrained by the power of ruins and like the fire devourers. If they fought alone, they might even be in danger of dying. To Li Qingshan, he was also the most troublesome opponent. His abilities were extremely well-rounded, without any openings. He could basically nullify all attacks. The Thousand Tendrils King could render Yi Duanhai helpless, but all he could do was die regretfully when he ran into him. Most importantly, his soul-damaging attacks were barely effective against him, while the Martial Chief King directly crushed him with pure strength. However, not only was he fearless, but his killing intent surged even more. The tiger demon surged and roared. He closed his eyes and held back the tiger demon's viciousness, silently waiting for that moment to arrive. At this moment, the weapon of demon chi suddenly vanished, revealing the cracked spirit turtle's profound shell. The Martial Chief King stood on it, raising his thick right leg high into the air. The surging demon chi turned into a huge, vicious spiked club, like a lone mountain that stood in the world, pointing straight at the sky. The lone mountain collapsed, and the spiked club suddenly smashed down, accompanied by the Martial Chief King's bellow. Shatter! Boom! The spirit turtle's profound shell shattered loudly, scattering into pieces. The spiked club continued onwards, smashing into the spirit turtle's back viciously and kicking up ripples. It was basically unable to maintain its form. Go! All right. Gong Yuan and Li Qingshan completed their brief conversation. The deep cold power of ruins surged violently, and the black spirit turtle turned into a huge wave, swallowing the Martial Chief King. With a flash of blood-red light, the blade aura rose up into the sky. Li Qingshan stood on the tip of the wave, drawing Tiger's fang from its sheath and swinging the blade viciously. With a tiger's roar, the world shook. The moment he gave up on defense, he launched his most powerful attack. The Martial Chief King was powerful, but when he struck out with his full strength, he could not help but freeze up for a moment. Gong Yuan fell down alone, watching the spiked club sweep past her coldly. She powered the heart of the abyss as hard as she could, and the power of ruins she had gathered all this time swallowed the Martial Chief King like it had a life of its own. The Martial Chief King shivered. His muscular body became dyed with a layer of black. The power of ruins permeated his body through his eyes, ears, mouth, nose, and even every pore. It gave off a bone-chilling coldness, where even his hot blood froze. Chapter 950. At that critical moment, the Martial Chief King grabbed the incoming blade and stared at Li Qingshan with widened eyes. He struggled to believe that he could deliver such a vicious strike. Every part of the Martial Chief King's body was comparable to a demonic weapon, indestructible. However, the tiger's fangs were even sharper and unstoppable. They contained a terrifying vibration force that tore apart his body like invisible saw teeth. Go! Li Qingshan let out a tiger's roar and chopped off the Martial Chief King's right arm. Demonic blood sprayed out, but the blade did not slow down at all, continuing to swing towards his abdomen and leaving behind a horrific wound. Tiger's fang sucked up its fill of blood from the strike and shone with blood-red light again. It flapped its wings and flickered with blood-red light. Thousands of blade auras burst forth at the same time, like flowers blooming. Demonic blood rained down. Gong Yuan watched this and smiled. Only at times like this did he seem a little more pleasing to the eye. At the same time, she powered the heart of the abyss with all her strength, not giving the Martial Chief King any time to catch his breath. The Martial Chief King's body became dyed with a layer of darkness. Even though he circulated his demon chi with all his might, he was unable to stop the invasion of the coldness, which pressed straight towards the scarlet demon heart in his body. In this state, it was not just his body. Even his mind seemed to be frozen, making his reactions extremely slow. In the blink of an eye, who knew how many times Li Qingshan had swung his blade? The Martial Chief King's limbs were all severed, and his body was crisscrossed with wounds. He was in an extremely horrific state, and his demon chi had been weakened to the limit. He seemed like he was on the brink of death, like he would be dead with just a few more swings. But for some reason, Li Qingshan frowned and instead felt uneasy. The spirit turtle's premonitions were rarely wrong. Was he fighting like a cornered beast? Very good. It's been a very long time since someone has injured me to this extent. Very good. So I'll let you die a little more painfully. The martial chief king snickered grimly before suddenly roaring out furiously. The demon heart in his body seemed to reach some kind of boundary, erupting with scarlet light and forcing the power of ruins end out of his body. This was the unique talent of his demon heart. When he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, he could burst forth with all of his potential, instantly raising his strength to another level. In the infernal domain, he relied on this talent to survive in battles that he was sure to lose, constantly breaking through bottlenecks until he became a demon king. The current situation seemed to be a narrow escape, but it was far from fatal to him. Gong Yuan said, "Be careful." The terrible wounds on the martial chief king's body suddenly spewed out black demonic qi, turning into demonic weapons that swarmed towards Li Qingshan. "Stop boasting. I'll kill you right now." Li Qingshan bellowed out. The demonic weapons flooded his eyes like a flood, but he went against the flow. His eyes became tranquil, allowing him to see through the trajectory of every single demonic weapon, either dodging or blocking. He flapped his wings and drifted about, as if he was dancing among the demonic weapons. However, the MO weapons were too densely packed, and there were always some that he couldn't dodge or block. Blood spurted out from his body, but he was unmoved. He avoided being hit in his vitals, straightened his body, and slashed with his saber. The saber aura was like a roaring blood dragon. With a clang, it suddenly stopped, revealing a straight saber blade that was tightly gripped by a large muscular hand. It turned out that the martial chief king had condensed 4 limbs with demonic qi. It was as though the scene just now was replaying. However, Tiger Fong trembled and roared, but it couldn't break free. This was the greatest flaw of Tiger Fong. It had to maintain the momentum of victory to unleash its might, forming a snowball advantage until it crushed the enemy. Just now, in order to block the MO weapon's attacks, a lot of the bloody light on it had been consumed, and its sharpness had also weakened. It was no longer enough to sever the martial chief king's demonic hand. The MO weapons formed from demonic qi swarmed back, sweeping towards Li Qingshan like a meat grinder. Li Qingshan clenched his teeth and gripped the saber hilt with both hands. He pressed the saber blade down inch by inch, pressing it right between the martial chief king's eyebrows. The martial chief king's heart trembled. He hadn't expected Li Qingshan to be so ruthless, looking like he wanted to die with him. He snorted coldly. "You want to die with me? You're not strong enough." His right hand gripped the saber blade tightly, and his left hand turned into a spinning drill that stabbed ruthlessly into Li Qingshan's abdomen. "Then let's give it a try." Li Qingshan grinned hideously. He split off a sliver of his divine sense and activated the Azura field. "Li Qingshan!" Gong Yuan hurried over to help, but she saw a blood-colored vortex ripple out and swallow the 2 of them. In the Azura field, Yin Qing was cultivating when her heart suddenly shivered. She felt an unusual killing, intent surge. It was as if she had returned to the Azura realm. Not far away, 2 Azura kings were engaged in a battle to the death. Li Qingshan and the martial chief king fought from the sky to the ground, tearing apart everything around them, but they never separated. They were like 2 vicious beasts tearing each other apart. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they would rather die than let go. However, Li Qingshan was undoubtedly weaker, and he was at a great disadvantage. Countless MO weapons landed on him, and Li Qingshan's flesh was peeled off piece by piece. It was as if he was being tortured by 1,000 cuts. He laughed maniacally as he poured all his strength into the saber blade. It was as if he was gambling on whether he would split open the Martial Chief King's head, or whether the Martial Chief King would tear him apart. There's actually such a person in the 9 provinces. Even in the demon domain, it's rare to see such a tenacious and vicious enemy. His physique is also astonishingly tough. However, he's still too stupid. He actually dares to compete with me in destructive power. Die. The Martial Chief King's demonic chi suddenly erupted. Amidst the sound of metal shattering, Li Qingshan's tiger bones shattered inch by inch. Before his head shattered, he was still laughing. The Martial Chief King breathed a deep sigh of relief and touched his brow. There was a deep gash on it, and it had almost split his head in half. Further down, it was his entire body. This battle had been far more difficult than he had imagined. After unleashing all of his potential, he was undoubtedly in his strongest combat state, but it was also when his defenses were at their weakest. There were many who could see through this, but not many who were bold enough to fight him head-on. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being crushed. Now, he only needed to break out of this realm. If he advanced, he could kill that merfolk. If he retreated, he could return to the demon domain to recuperate. There would be no more danger. Although he was covered in wounds and fatigued, Yin Qing, who was hidden in the void, could not find a single opportunity to assassinate him. The surging killing intent caused the scarlet vortex in the sky to spin. Another 2 Azura commanders descended. They glanced at the Martial Chief King before moving far away. Although they were bloodthirsty and warlike, this did not mean that they liked to throw eggs at rocks. There was a phoenix cry, and the flames gathered again. The phoenix danced in the sky, undergoing nirvanic rebirth. The flames scattered, and Li Qingshan, who had clearly been pulverized, reappeared in the world. He looked down at the Martial Chief King and said, "You've lost, Martial Chief King." The Martial Chief King suddenly looked up, an expression of disbelief on his face. Gong Yuan picked up the Azura field and was worrying when Li Qingshan walked out. Although he was covered in wounds and cut a sorry figure, he was brimming with energy. "Where's the Martial Chief King?" Gong Yuan relaxed inwardly, but her expression did not change as she asked coldly, "Isn't this?" Li Qingshan raised his right hand and grabbed the Martial Chief King's head. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, and he had died with everlasting regret. Gong Yuan looked at Li Qingshan's radiant smile. He looked like a child showing off his prize, and there was actually some naivety to him. She could not help but feel her heartstrings tug, but he still managed to escape. Li Qingshan sighed in admiration. The Martial Chief King was more decisive than he had imagined. He had actually fled toward the scarlet vortex in the sky immediately. Although he had successfully killed him in the end, his soul had escaped into the scarlet vortex. Presumably, he had already reincarnated in the Azura realm and become an Azura. With his aptitude, he would at least become an Azura king in the future. However, there was no regret on Li Qingshan's face. Instead, there was some anticipation. He said to the sky, "I was able to defeat you this time, but it was somewhat unfair. If we were to fight one-on-one, I would definitely not be your match. If we have the chance to meet again in the Azura realm, let's fight again." "Idiot," Gong Yuan said. "Who are you talking about?" Li Qingshan was stunned. "Who else is here? In the situation back then, you should have retreated, yet you insisted on charging forward to be beaten. If that's not idiotic, then what is? You're the idiot. If I retreated, he would have come for you. You don't know how fierce this guy was when he was on the verge of death." Li Qingshan said disapprovingly. He had the skin of a bull and the bones of a tiger, yet he had still been forcefully crushed in the end. He sized up Gong Yuan. "With your small physique, I'm afraid you would have been beaten to death in a few blows. Gong Yuan was instantly speechless. His gaze lingered on her soft breasts, slender waist, and graceful fishtail. He felt a sense of tenderness for the fairer sex, but he only retracted his gaze after being glared at by Gong Yuan. I know you're also worried about me. Li Qingshan patted her shoulder. Now that he thought about it, if he hadn't dragged the martial chief king into the Azura realm, he would have very likely escaped into the demon's den. Although he could shatter the demon's den, his physique wasn't as big as the Thousand Tendrils King or the Corpse King from back then. He wasn't much bigger than an ordinary person. At most, he would have been sliced by the spatial cracks once or twice. It wouldn't have been a fatal injury, and he might even have escaped unscathed. Although Li Qingshan didn't think too much during the fierce battle, he relied on his battle instincts to face the martial chief king. He sacrificed a chance of nirvana rebirth and killed the martial chief king. Concern? Gong Yuan shook her head gently. She refused to let down her might as a queen. Since I agreed to help you, I've obviously been prepared to die. Don't worry. Since I invited you here from the South Sea, I can't say there won't be any danger at all, but no matter who it is, they'll have to step over my corpse first. Li Qingshan said sincerely. He had always kept a clear line between his debts of gratitude and grievances. This time was different from the war against the fire devourers. Back then, they were only cooperating, and neither of them owed the other anything. If he truly faced certain death, he obviously wouldn't be so great as to die for Gong Yuan. However, this time, Gong Yuan had come to help him without any compensation in the name of a friend. His principles prevented him from watching Gong Yuan die before him. I'll help you collect your corpse. The corner of Gong Yuan's lips curled into a fleeting smile. All right then. Li Qingshan shook his head. Her venomous tongue sure did seem to come from the same source. Afterwards, he collected the corpses of the demon folk. Find a place to rest. I'm going back for now. Li Qingshan flew off, only to discover that Gong Yuan was right behind him. He could not help but raise an eyebrow and smile. What, you don't want to part with me? If you're killed along the way, where am I supposed to collect your corpse? Gong Yuan paused. Or if I'm killed, how are you going to stop them? Chapter 9:51. Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan arrived at the myriad poison cult together. The night was as deep as water, and the main hall was bathed in golden light, making the gloomy hall seem like a holy land of Buddhism. The divine nun of the South Sea? Gong Yuan said, there had never been a single true Buddhist disciple in the South. In her memory, only the divine nun of the South Sea possessed such a radiance and bearing, and her presence was extremely similar, yet slightly different. No, Li Qingshan rushed back in a hurry, but his footsteps faltered. What's wrong? This was the first time Gong Yuan had seen such hesitation on his face. Nothing. Li Qingshan shook his head. He took a step and arrived in the hall. Little and sat at the end of the light and smiled as soon as she saw him. She could clearly sense the change in his presence. Clearly, he had undergone nirvanic rebirth. She could not help but show concern. Are you fine? It was just a small problem. Are you? All right. Li Qingshan smiled. His hesitation vanished, and he recovered his usual decisiveness. Although she was no longer that ignorant child, he had never forgotten to set an example for her. Yeah, Little and nodded gently. Whether it was the battle between Li Qingshan and the martial chief king, or Little and resisting the invasion of the light, they were all rather difficult. Although they did not say anything, they understood each other very well. Ru Xian's gaze moved between them, and she sighed inside for some reason. She backed out of the hall and happened to run into Gong Yuan at the entrance. She bowed, neither distant nor intimate. Gong Yuan glanced at Ru Xian deeply, and only nodded slightly. This was her usual arrogance as the merfolk queen. Ru Exian smiled and felt her heart lighten up. It would be for the best if their grievances were settled and they no longer had anything to do with each other. In the end, Gong Yuan didn't step into the main hall. She waited outside and thought to herself, although our cultivation methods are compatible and suitable for dual cultivation, our paths are completely different. He won't stay in the South Sea, and I won't leave the South Sea. It'll be difficult for us to become Tao companions. Only people like them can be considered as true Taoist companions. Li Qingshan took out the corpses of the martial chief king and the demon folk, piling them up into a mountain. The smell of blood filled the hall, and the lingering demon qi radiated with filth. Under the illumination of the Buddhist light, the demon qi dispersed, and the corpses of the demon folk showed signs of melting away. This originated from the fundamental contradiction between Buddhism and the demonic, purifying and polluting one another. Little unclenched his fists and sucked in a deep breath. He spat out an extremely thin strand of samadhi flames of white bone, which slithered to the bottom of the mountain of corpses like a slithering snake. A while later, the pure white, transparent flames spread out from bottom to top, setting the mountain of corpses alight. Little and made his way to the top of the mountain of corpses. The samadhi flames of white bone burned silently, like a white lotus in full bloom. However, it did not produce any intense reaction with the Buddhist light. Instead, it slowly seeped in, devouring the Buddhist light like it was spinning silk from a cocoon. Within the flames, Little N's white bones flickered in and out of view. Beneath his great beauty was a set of withered bones. It was clearly a terrifying sight of a mountain of corpses and white bones, but it contained indescribable mysteries of Buddhism. It confirmed the cycle of life and death, and the supreme wonders of the cycle of appearance and emptiness. It confirmed once again that the path of white bone and great beauty did indeed originate from Orthodox Buddhism. This was also why the divine nun of the South Sea was unable to immediately cripple the path of white bone and great beauty, even though her cultivation in Vinaya completely surpassed Little Anne's, and she even possessed the wonders of the laws of precepts. This originated from a fundamental difference in cultivation. It was not the difference between her and Little, but the difference between her and the white bone bodhisattva. If the divine nun of the South Sea's cultivation were slightly weaker, the Sarira would have been devoured and converted by the samadhi flames of white bone and great beauty a long time ago. Little and focused on circulating the cultivation method, and his expression gradually calmed down. Rather than calming down, it was more accurate to say that some of his emotions had been extracted once again. Li Qingshan stood with his hands behind his back, gazing at the mountain of corpses for a very long time before Little, and he furrowed his brows and suddenly made his way out of the hall. When he brushed past Gong Yuan, he said, "Rest up and prepare for the next battle." Little and looked at his tall figure and could clearly sense his struggle. There was an indelible sense of gentleness and reliance in his heart. "Qingshan, don't feel sad for me. So, what if I'm emotionless? So what if I've sunk into the demonic path? I will always be by your side until destruction arrives." After recuperating in the myriad poison cult for several days, Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan set off on their journey again. Although his vitality had already recovered, he could not make up for the phoenix's nerva he had lost in such a short amount of time. In other words, he only had 2 more chances for rebirth, and he would directly turn into an egg with the final chance, losing all of his battle prowess. In a battle against demon kings, that was no different from dying on the spot, so the upcoming journey would become even more dangerous. When they were about to arrive at the next demon cavern, Gong Yuan asked, "Is this all for her?" "No, it's all for me," Li Qingshan said. He was stern for once. She killed her master for you as well? Gong Yuan's eyes were like ice, giving off a piercing coldness. It must have been hard on you to only ask now. Li Qingshan smiled. Li Qingshan, I may have agreed to assist you, but the divine nun of the South Sea has shown kindness to us merfolk. I will never risk my life to assist a master killer. Gong Yuan said firmly. It's not as you think. Li Qingshan gave a rough explanation of what had happened. Is that true? When Gong Yuan heard how the divine nun of the South Sea was willing to sacrifice her life and pour all of her cultivation into little Anne's cultivation method, she could not help but be stunned. She was not a Buddhist, so she could not understand what the path of white bone and great beauty meant to the divine nun of the South Sea, much less the divine nun of the South Sea's feelings for little Anne. She only found the story unbelievable. If you don't want to help me, I won't force you. Go back to the South Sea. Li Qingshan waved his hand. You want to order me around? Li Qingshan smiled. Then please fight me again, Your Majesty. I'll accept your request. At the end of the sea of trees, demon chi surged into the air, connecting the sky and the ground. The two of them flew over together. Very soon, violent rumbles rang out, startling flocks of birds in the forest. Time flew by. Working together, they swept through the 7 great demon caverns of the south in a short 3 months, killing 3 demon kings. Fortunately, they did not encounter another troublesome opponent like the martial chief king. Even though he had some strange tricks up his sleeves, it was difficult for him to block their head-on attacks. However, they still let 4 demon kings escape, or more accurately, 5. When they were fighting another demon king in the north, another demon king suddenly appeared from the demon den. Li Qingshan was tempted to fight to the death, but Gong Yuan stubbornly refused, so all he could do was retreat in the end. Unfortunately, by then, Li Qingshan had already used up his second chance at Nerva rebirth. In the 2 battles that followed, he let another 2 demon kings escape. Because of this, Chapter 952. Smoke rippled and mist rose. Within a vast lake, demons and monsters swam about, not daring to raise their heads. In the depths of the lake, Gong Yuan opened her arms and lay quietly in the middle of the lake. Her slender blue fishtail stretched quietly and swayed with the waves. Her dark blue eyes looked at the cloudy sky with a hint of exhaustion. Bang! Pa! Familiar footsteps stepped over the water, creating waves and waves as they walked towards her. Duh! The rain fell, stirring up thousands of ripples. Gong Yuan simply closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to see the person. In the rain and fog, a tall and straight figure with a long saber strode over and squatted down beside her. His crimson long hair fell on her cheek, but she didn't seem to feel it. You must be anxious from waiting, Li Qingshan said. The continuous fierce fighting had also dyed him with a layer of wind and frost, but he didn't seem tired at all and was still full of fighting spirit. He had just returned from the myriad poison cult and handed the newly harvested prey to little Anne. Although the prey was getting less and less, little Anne's condition was getting better and better, which made him feel a lot more relieved. He was in a good mood and prepared to continue fighting. Gong Yuan ignored him. She wasn't a battle maniac like him and didn't love fighting at all. Compared to the consumption of physical strength, the mental exhaustion was more difficult to eliminate. If Li Qingshan hadn't helped her to calm her mind and get rid of her inner demons through the method of dual cultivation, she wouldn't have been able to bear it. Besides the time when he went to the martial chief king, she didn't follow him back to the myriad poison cult. Instead, she randomly found a lake to rest and wait. Suddenly, she felt a warmth on her face. Li Qingshan's hand caressed her cold and delicate cheeks and said softly, Yuan, you've worked hard these days. Gong Yuan still closed her eyes, as if she was asleep. Li Qingshan was rather surprised. If he had tried this in the past, she would have reacted immediately. She would have shown a great deal of disgust and disdain. It worked every single time, but he never thought it would actually fail this time. As it seemed, she had already developed a resistance to it after experiencing so much. He smiled and lay down beside her, supporting his head with one hand. Looking at her face, he suddenly felt a little reluctant. As little and got better, this journey was about to end. Then he would go to Qingzhou and start a new journey, and she would return to the South Sea. From then on, they would be separated by endless mountains and rivers, and he didn't know when they would meet again. The 3 months they had spent together were only an extremely short amount of time to cultivators, but they had either entrusted their lives to each other, fought alongside each other, lived together, or cultivated together. Who knew how many dangers and conflicts they had gone through? Even Li Qingshan was very surprised that they were able to last until now, without disbanding. This was not because he was willing to compromise and go along with everything. On the contrary, using all kinds of methods to break her cold expression was a big hobby of his. Therefore, he used words to offend her dignity countless times and teased her when they were dual cultivating. She was angry and even hit him, but she never said that she wanted to return to the South Sea. He was very touched, and then became even more unscrupulous and insatiable. Because their hearts were connected through dual cultivation, she didn't seem to particularly hate it. What did this mean? Li Qingshan understood a little. He took her into his arms and emitted a calm and tranquil aura. A ripple spread, and wherever it went, the surface of the lake became as smooth as a mirror. Gong Yuan murmured and changed to a more comfortable position. The cold and dignified aura dissipated, and she looked like an ordinary mermaid. Her fiery scarlet hair and deep blue hair intertwined together, leaning against each other. Both of their faces were handsome, like a perfect couple, forming a tranquil and beautiful picture. Li Qingshan gazed at the sky. If he had been born in the Mist Province, if he had met her earlier, then he would have remained in the South and South Sea in peace, becoming the son-in-law of the Crystal Palace and assisting her in strengthening the merfolk race. So what? Saying she could not love someone wholeheartedly was just a verbal argument. Actually, why would he care? From the beginning till the end, had there ever been a single woman who had interested him wholeheartedly? Han Xiongji had her parents and clan. Yi Liusu was focused on reviving her race, and Commander Gu, who he had once fallen in love with at first sight, was still engraved in his mind with her transcendent bearing. However, she actually believed him, and she even became speechless from his words. How pure! However, there were no ifs in life. Li Qingshan shook his head and dismissed these pointless thoughts. He had no idea how much she could sense these feelings. She remained completely still the entire time, as if she was asleep. She slept deeply, drifting along with the waves until she reached that lone island in the South Sea. Sister, stop trying to persuade me. I've let you down, but one day in the future, you'll meet someone you love, and you'll naturally understand how I feel. That day will never come, because I'm not as selfish as you. Her icy cold heart surged as if she had heard a terrifying curse, but did she also feel a hint of envy and anticipation? No, we definitely will, because we're exactly the same. After several days of continuous rain, Gong Yuan suddenly opened her eyes. With a swing of her fishtail, she broke free from Li Qingshan's arms. She tidied her creaseless dress and said to Li Qingshan coldly, "Let's go." "Aren't you going to rest a little longer?" Li Qingshan asked. "There's no need. The final battle is coming up next. Let's end it quickly, so that I can return to the South Sea." "All right." Li Qingshan immediately pulled himself together and sat down with his legs crossed. The figure of a spirit turtle appeared on his body, and he divined first, this battle will be very dangerous. Which battle against the Demon King isn't dangerous? Not to mention that you no longer have the ability to be reborn, so it'll obviously be even more dangerous. If you don't want to go, I'll return to the South Sea. Are you reluctant to part with me? Li Qingshan lay down with his arms as a pillow and said with interest. Gong Yuan sneered and immediately rose into the air. Li Qingshan followed closely behind and grabbed her hand. Accompany me on my last journey. Don't let me send you on your last journey. Gong Yuan said, Ha, with you collecting my corpse, what's there for me to be afraid of? Li Qingshan laughed. As they spoke, they burst through the clouds, and the sunlight illuminated the sea of clouds. Gong Yuan looked back and found it difficult to forget. She thought to herself, Little sister, I've actually always understood how you feel. Just like you said, we're so similar. There's only one difference. I'm the elder sister, while you're the younger sister. The elder sister has to protect the younger sister, and this bastard human demon is 10,000 times worse than that damned fire devourer. Thousands of kilometers away, in the demon cavern, a few voices whispered, Bone-eating Shaman King, are you certain they'll come here? Are you doubting the meditative Brain King's divination? Hee, I wouldn't dare. I'm just asking. Don't worry, we've already eliminated enough places. This will definitely be their next step, as well as their final step. This is all great evil god Qiongqi's arrangement. Chapter 953. Within the myriad poison cult, the mountain of corpses beneath Little N's feet piled up ceaselessly before being ceaselessly devoured by the samadhi flames of white bone. Up until today, not much remained. She stood on the mountain of corpses with the blood sea banner on her back. She fiddled with the skull prayer beads in one hand and the Buddha slaying sword in the other. She chanted scriptures, sometimes singing the chant of Devanaga, sometimes chanting the secret techniques of Vinaya, and so on. Golden Buddhist light radiated from his body, making him look grand and dignified. However, the samadhi flame of white bone twined around it, twisting and looking ferocious. She lowered her head, as if she did not hear anything. There seemed to be deep benevolence on her face, but upon closer inspection, she was expressionless and calm. She only focused on circulating the path of white bone and great beauty. After 3 months of arduous cultivation, constantly devouring and converting the 4 demon kings and countless demon folk as resources, the path of white bone and great beauty was already on the verge of breaking through. Actually, if it were not for the divine Nun of the South Sea's interference, he would have been able to reach the 3rd layer already and undergo the tribulation. However, this was not a bad thing. It would allow her to have a deeper accumulation, which would increase her chances of transcending the tribulation, and the power she would gain would also be stronger. By the time the mountain of corpses had been completely incinerated, the golden light and the samadhi flames of white bone had reached a delicate balance. All they needed was a little more resources to break the balance, and then they would rapidly devour the divine Nun of the South Sea's power. Little and looked towards the east. Li Qingshan wanted to go to the last devil's den. Li Qingshan stood still and stopped at the edge of a swamp. The devil's den was less than 100 miles away, but it was already right in front of him. Demonic chi soared into the sky, connecting heaven and earth. Demonic clouds covered the sky and covered the sun. This was a scene he was already used to. What's wrong? Gong Yuan stopped in midair on her cloud. Seeing his serious expression, she couldn't help but ask, It's nothing. Let's observe first. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. Let's not run into 2 more demon kings and waste our trip. Li Qingshan smiled at her. Just as he was about to enter the swamp and step into the battlefield of the final battle, A thought flashed through his mind, but it was fleeting, and he couldn't grasp it. "You've finally improved a little." Gong Yuan was lying on the cloud in an elegant manner. She rested her chin on her hand, and the corners of her lips were slightly raised. However, that smile was more like mockery than praise. "I just think that you're too weak. I'm afraid that you won't be able to hold on if you encounter an opponent that's too strong." Li Qingshan curled his lips and waved his hand. Mystic light illuminates all. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out, constantly rearranging themselves and illuminating the demon cavern in the distance. Countless demon folk moved the stone pillars around like ants, constructing the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. According to Gong Yuan, this formation was extremely popular in the demon domain. However, the 9 provinces were not the demon domain, so it was suppressed by the invisible laws of the world, which was why its effects were only SOSO. If 12 demon kings joined forces to activate it, its power would be earth-shattering. However, there were only 12 demon commanders here. Although there were slightly more stone pillars, there was nothing for him to worry about. The image flashed past the stone pillars and arrived at the source of the demon chi. The demon cavern was even larger than before, spewing out surging demon chi. Its irregular edges still seemed sharp and abrupt, completely at odds with the surroundings. It was like a mischievous child had used a utility knife to carve out a piece of a famous painting carelessly. Within the surging demon chi, many colossal figures could be vaguely seen. They were like huge snakes, radiating with a terrifying aura. So many demon kings. Li Qingshan was surprised. At first glance, there were at least 6 or 7 of them. "You're mistaken. There's only one." Gong Yuan arrived beside Li Qingshan on a cloud and pointed at a corner of the image. Li Qingshan also saw it clearly. As it turned out, the huge snakes all had the same body. It was a hydra, but he did not relax at all. The hydra was also a legendary exotic beast. Its bloodline originated from the divine beast, Jiuying. Every single head possessed its own power, and each head was equivalent to a life. If they wanted to kill it, they would have to destroy all 9 heads. However, its regenerative abilities were extremely startling. Even if its head was cut off, it would regrow very quickly. If it really is a hydra, then it'll be very difficult to win this battle. Gong Yuan's expression was stern. Li Qingshan nodded slightly. If it were in the beginning, they would have been confident in taking on any demon king, but right now, they were not in peak condition. Killing an exotic beast like that would be extremely difficult and dangerous. The crux of the matter was whether this was a hydra or just a strange, demonified form of a demon king. If it was the former, then they would have to be prepared to retreat. The demon kings hiding in the depths of the demon's den and close to the demon realm also had an intense discussion. Meditative brain monarch, why did you let the 9-headed king be up there? You're scaring them away. 2 demon kings asked at the same time. The voices were of a man and a woman, but strangely, they overlapped. The 9-headed king has always been stationed here. Of course, it's still him now. He's not a real hydra. He's just a demonified form from cultivation. If he's scared off by an empty shell, then this Li Qingshan isn't worth that person's effort. Empty shell, meditative brain monarch. I heard that you fled at the sight of the battle and gave up the demon's Denver. How dare you say that I'm an empty shell? Hee, I know very well whether I fought or not. Based on my calculations, if we weren't here today, you wouldn't have escaped death. Shut up. What, do you think you're stronger than the Martial Chief King? At the mention of the Martial Chief King's name, the demon kings all fell silent. Even among demon kings, the Martial Chief King was renowned for his ruthlessness. there were not a lot of people who had the confidence to be his opponent in a one-on-one battle, and he was highly trusted by the Demon Emperor, having been summoned back to the demon domain several times. Originally, they thought he would be able to display his brilliance in this battle, but they never thought he would die so soon. Stop, both of you. Now is not the time for internal strife. Nine-headed king, not only are we here for revenge, but we're also here for great evil god Qiongqi's plan. It's fine if you prevent us from getting revenge, but if you ruin great evil god's plan, bone-eating king, don't you dare take advantage of me. I'll chew through your bones sooner or later. The nine-headed king said viciously, but he no longer dared to act recklessly. If this ambush failed because of him, then there was no need for great evil god Qiongqi to do anything. The demon kings below that had suffered greatly at the hands of Li Qingshan could skin him alive. Meditative Brain King, what should we do now? The bone-eating shaman king ignored the nine-headed king's bluff and threat and changed the subject. Nine-headed king, show them what you're made of, the meditative brain king ordered. Hee, show them just what kind of trash you are. You deserve to die. All of their communication was secretive and swift. It took a long time to describe, but it all happened in the blink of an eye. On the edge of the swamp, Li Qingshan was just about to test the waters from afar, and retreat if he failed when a roar rang out from the depths of the swamp. The 9 snake heads rose high into the air like skyscrapers, radiating with surging demon chi. The snake eyes stared over, filled with coldness and malice. Chapter 954. Li Qingshan grabbed Gong Yuan's hand and leapt into the air, powering the heart of the abyss. Slivers of the dark power of ruins and extended out, enveloping the two of them, and assuming the shape of a spirit turtle. It shook its head and wagged its tail in an extremely realistic manner. Drifting snow. Gong Yuan chanted silently. Wisps of clouds appeared, constantly spreading and expanding. They gradually darkened in color, and by the time they turned pitch black, they had already shrouded half the sky. Heavy snowflakes drifted down. Li Qingshan used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to assist Gong Yuan in stabilizing her mind. He controlled the tremendous power of ruins and pushed the power of the technique to the limit. They had already become extremely familiar with this tactic. Their objective was to destroy the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous first, and only then could they fight the Demon King. The snow drifted down, kicking up ripples in the air, with the demon chi. Destroying the formation originally took a lot of mental and physical effort, but they possessed the heart of the abyss, which allowed them to absorb power from ruins and endlessly, which was why they succeeded time and time again. Hiss! The 9-headed king raised its 9 snake heads, hissing and roaring at the sky together. Within the surging demon chi, 9 grayish-brown, turbid streams rushed into the air, spiraling towards the spirit turtle. The surging streams contained heavy, foul demon chi, which could contaminate weapons and even souls. It was even more effective against the cultivators of this world. Gazing at the whistling streams, Gong Yuan could not help but reveal an undetectable smile. Not only is it a fake, but it just happens to be countered by us. Looks like the final battle will be easier than I imagined, said Li Qingshan. The streams arrived 30 meters before the spirit turtle. The spirit turtle opened its mouth and sprayed out a strand of cold air mixed with snowflakes. In that instant, the 9 streams all froze. The gray river of ice crossed the horizon and cracked, falling down from the sky and kicking up surging muddy water in the swamp. At this moment, the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous below had been weakened to the limit. Thousands of demon folk had been frozen. They could directly attack and kill the fake Hydra now. Li Qingshan's gaze constantly swept around as he sank into thought. What's wrong? Gong Yuan asked. It's nothing. Maybe it's because it's always been too difficult. I'm not used to it after suddenly becoming easy. Li Qingshan shook his head. The spirit turtle did not give off any warning signs. The entire process of the battle was no different from before, but he just felt like something was off. In the demon's den, the demon kings were discussing the battle above. The meditative brain king was right. The nine-headed king is just an empty shell. He's no match for them at all. Even the martial chief king wasn't a match, much less him. All right, let's not talk anymore. Let's wait for them to come down and take revenge together. The formation has been broken. Why hasn't he come down yet? Could it be that he has discovered something? Impossible. This is the demon's den. It's a completely different world from the other side. Moreover, the two worlds are connected, and the mysteries of heaven are abnormally chaotic. No matter how sharp his senses are, he can't sense anything. They're here. They're here. Amidst the conversation filled with surprise and hatred, the spirit turtle descended from above, sweeping up the snowstorm and charging towards the nine-headed king. The nine-headed king's body was as large as a mountain. His grayish-brown skin was uneven and covered in spikes. Compared to him, the dark black spirit turtle was much smaller, but it was also much more refined and elegant. However, the 9 snake heads could not help but shrink back. Fear appeared in their cold eyes as well. They spat out turbid streams even more furiously in an attempt to stop the spirit turtle from approaching them. The turbid streams erupted like a mountain flood. They were extremely shocking, but they were frozen as soon as they approached the spirit turtle. The spirit turtle broke through the ice along the way, filling the air with gray ice dust. Although the nine-headed king possessed the bloodline of the nine-headed snake, he could only spit out turbid streams. He could not be like the real nine-headed snake, where each head possessed its own power. Now that he was completely suppressed by the spirit turtle, he seemed particularly powerless. However, this was exactly the effect that the demon kings who had laid down the trap wanted. Everything proceeded according to plan. Meanwhile, Li Qingshan stepped into the trap of death step by step. He's trying to escape. Li Qingshan was rather surprised. The nine-headed king actually refused to fight him. He turned around and fled into the demon cavern. Although the turbid streams were suppressed, his tough body alone was enough for him to fight any opponent, yet he was so weak. Li Qingshan was about to charge over and smash the demon cavern with a punch to see if he could keep the nine-headed king here, or at least a part of him. Gong Yuan's expression changed. She retreated quickly with him. It's an ambush. Boom. A pillar of demonic qi burst through the swamp and connected with the demonic clouds. There were a total of 12 pillars like that, forming the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous that Li Qingshan could not be more familiar with. However, it was unprecedentedly massive, enveloping them within. In an instant, the scenery before them changed. The swamp vanished, and only the swirling demonic qi remained, pressing in from all directions. The spirit turtle was twisted. Li Qingshan felt as if he was advancing through a sea of magma. Looking up, the 12 demonic qi transformed into 12 great demon gods of various shapes and sizes. They looked like humans and beasts, gathering and dispersing as they stared at them. Although they were not actual living beings, the auras they gave off were exceptionally terrifying. Some were arrogant, some were cold, some were furious, and some were greedy. Xiongqi's existence could be vaguely seen among them. He widened his eyes and cast a curious gaze. There was even a hint of naivety and fear in them. It was like a child looking at an ant. In the next moment, a leopard would descend. Perhaps it would crush them with its fingers, or perhaps it would burn with flames. It would slaughter them without knowing what it was doing. Li Qingshan withdrew his gaze and looked down. The demonic qi spewing out of the demon cavern was even more turbulent, as if it had turned into a whirlpool. The doubts in his heart were suddenly cleared up, and he even came to a sudden realization. The nine-headed king stopped fleeing and turned his 9 heads around to look at him coldly. Amidst the cold, sinister, and strange laughter, the demon kings appeared from the demon cavern one after another. Yuan, quite a few old friends have come today. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips twitched, apart from the bone-eating shaman king. He had seen every single one of them before. They were the 5 demon kings he had fought in the past, coupled with the 9-headed king. There were a total of 7 of them, with 7 demon kings working together. Just how many people across the entire 9 provinces could stop them? They had also been caught off guard, so they were already in dire straits. The spirit turtle's warning skyrocketed, reaching its peak, but it was already too late. The surrounding region has already been sealed up. Can you get through it? Gong Yuan's heart rapidly sank. She was in no mood to joke around. I can, but they won't give us the opportunity. Sure enough, you can't say something like, last time, carelessly. When Li Qingshan saw these old friends, he understood. His various abilities were no longer a secret in the success of battles. Since they had gone to the trouble of luring him in, they would never let him leave so easily. The demon kings were calm and composed. They were in no hurry to attack. There's still one more opportunity, Gong Yuan said after a moment of silence. What opportunity? I can help you stop them. Are you serious? Li Qingshan frowned. No matter how powerful Gong Yuan was, she could not stop 7 demon kings unless she was willing to blow herself up, even if she wanted to drag them down with her. He could also sense the sliver of determination in her heart. Humph, don't flatter yourself. If it weren't for the fact that I have no other choice, why would I resort to something like this? I don't want to die with you. Gong Yuan's expression was just as cold as before, but Li Qingshan's heart warmed up. Just how many people in the world would risk their lives to pave a path of survival for you? He smiled and pulled her into his arms. I've said it before, I won't let you die before me. Let's just be a pair of lovebirds that share the same fate. Li Qingshan, I originally thought you were a straightforward man, but I didn't think you'd be so fussy. Since I've agreed to help you purge the demons, I've already made up my mind. At most, I'll just return your life. Gong Yuan said, Haha, what's the point of having your life? You might as well say you're only useful to me if you're alive. Just stay here obediently. Don't act like your father died. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 demon kings. I just happen to be worrying about the lack of resources. Li Qingshan remained composed. Who knew how many times he had fallen into dire straits over the years, so there was no need for him to panic. At most, he would just die. From the moment he set foot in the crouching ox village, he had made up his mind. Li Qingshan, do you recognize me? The bone-eating shaman king stood out from the crowd. Where did you pop out from? Li Qingshan really had never seen the bone-eating shaman king before. Looking at the hatred on his face, he found it rather baffling. He felt like his aura was similar to a demon king's, but it was also slightly different, so he could vaguely guess his identity. I am the bone-eating shaman king. When you killed my bone-eating shamans, did you ever think this day would come? Originally, I should have ground your bones to dust and destroyed your soul, but great evil god Qiongqi is willing to give you a chance to join the demon domain. As soon as the bone-eating shaman king said that, the demon kings began to make a fuss before Li Qingshan could even answer. What? Aren't we going to kill him? We can't spare him. Bone-eating, how dare you lie to us? They had all witnessed Li Qingshan's strength. He had yet to undergo the third heavenly tribulation, but he could already hold his own against demon kings. If he joined the demon domain and received the favor of the demon god Cheongchi, perhaps his status would even surpass theirs in the future. Not only would they be unable to exact revenge, but they might even suffer from revenge instead. How could they just let that go? Only the meditative brain king remained silent. Cheongchi's interest had never been in killing, just like how a child would crush an ant not because of hatred, but because it was fun. However, there really was something special about this Li Qingshan to be able to make Cheongchi pay attention to him like this. This is great, evil god, Cheongchi's order. Are you bold enough to defy him? The bone-eating shaman king scoffed. Lying to one another was the norm in the demon domain. If they were fooled, they would just be stupid. The demon kings immediately fell silent. Demon god Cheongchi, who had been born from the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, seemed to be staring at them, let alone demon kings like them. Even the demon emperor, who led them in attacking the 9 provinces, dared not oppose Cheongchi's will. Sure enough. No wonder. All right. Li Qingshan sighed. He had actually fallen into a trap set up by such an important figure. What an honor. In other words, you agree. The bone-eating shaman king was rather surprised. He sneered, and I had thought you would put up a little resistance. King of savages, what's that saying again? A wise man submits to circumstances, Li Qingshan said. Then come. The bone-eating shaman king turned around and raised his hand, revealing the demon cavern behind him. Chapter 955. Li Qingshan had once asked the Banyan Tree King for guidance. Just what kind of place is the demon domain? The Banyan Tree King said, the demon domain is only a general name. It contains many worlds, all connected by demon caverns, forming a tremendous entity. If demon folk successfully invade the 9 provinces, it will become a new demon domain, and all living beings will become demon folk. Demon folk spread the creeds of the demonic path, blaspheming immortals and Buddhas, and slandering morality. They spread through the great 1,000 worlds like a plague. Li Qingshan then asked, if the demon domain is that powerful, how can the 9 provinces fend off it? Every world has its own laws of the world. The strongest that can enter the 9 provinces are demon kings that have undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Existences stronger than that cannot remain here. After all, no matter how powerful they are individually, they can't contend against the entire world. Why would they need stronger existences? As long as they send enough demon kings, wouldn't victory be easy? I'm not sure about the exact situation either. It's said that the status of the demon domain in the great 1,000 worlds is similar to the status of demonic cultivators in the 9 provinces. Although they possess relatively great strength, they do not have the upper hand. They are constantly restrained and attacked by the righteous path. We might only be a corner of the battlefield here. Li Qingshan came to a realization. Just like a large-scale war, it would definitely be a clash between countless groups or even individuals. No side would send an army to kill a group of soldiers, as it would not be worth it at all. It might even affect the overall situation. Back then, he still felt rather lost. As it turned out, the rise and fall of so many races and the sacrifices of countless experts were only a corner of the battlefield. How insignificant! However, he dismissed this sigh very soon and became even more determined about his goal. There would be a day when he would venture beyond the 9 heavens and surpass all insignificance. But right now, he faced a difficult decision. If he entered the demon domain, Cheongchi's strength was not something he could contend with. He would be at the mercy of others, unable to put up any struggle or resistance. The feeling of being at the mercy of others was not pleasant. Even if he managed to keep his life, the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression and the phoenix's scripture of Nerva would probably be crippled, and he would completely fall into the demonic path. It really was ironic now that he thought about it. The divine nun of the South Sea was willing to sacrifice her life just to lead little and onto the righteous path. However, Xiongqi did not hesitate to use several demon kings as bait to set up such a trap, also that he would return to the demonic Tao. What path we are going to take? Was it that important? Of course, many years later, he would understand that it was indeed very important. What's wrong, Li Qingshan? Do you want to go back on your word? If he wanted to stall for time, I advise you to give up on this idea. I'll count down from 3. If you don't enter the devil's den, I'll kill you immediately. 3. The bone-eating shaman king's face was dignified and stern. He possessed the bearing of an arrogant king. He treated Li Qingshan like a servant too. Actually, he did not want Li Qingshan to enter the demon realm and submit to Qiongqi. As long as he dared to resist, it would be perfectly justifiable for him to taste his flesh and blood. All right, I'll go to the demon realm. However, Qiongqi wants me, so it has nothing to do with her. 2. The bone-eating shaman king's eyes were half closed, completely ignoring him. Yeah, since you don't want her, just leave her to us. We'll take good care of her. You can't even protect your own woman. How pitiful! The demon kings snickered strangely. Li Qingshan frowned, brimming with murderousness. The demon kings paused. Every single one of them felt like Li Qingshan would lunge at them in the next moment, so they instinctively assumed a defensive posture. Only when they returned to their senses did they realize Li Qingshan had not moved at all. They were surprised. What heavy malice this kid has. He's actually on par with the martial chief king. Though, at this point, I'm not afraid of you resisting. I'm only afraid of you not resisting. They became more and more fearless as they mocked and insulted him. Gong Yuan suddenly felt rather sad, not for her own safety, but because she did not want to see him being humiliated. She silently clenched his hand. Let's go. I still have to collect your corpse. 1. The bone-eating shaman king's eyes widened and shone brightly. Li Qingshan nodded at Gong Yuan and leapt into the demon cavern, passing through the demon kings in a flash. He seemed impatient, as if he was truly afraid the bone-eating shaman king would strike the moment he finished counting to 3. The bone-eating shaman king felt some pity, but the corner of his lips curled into a sneer. He felt rather pleased inside. What king of savages? That's all there is to it. As a result, he waved his hand, and the demon kings exchanged glances before following closely behind, diving into the demon cavern. Li Qingshan only felt like he had stepped into a dark, deep tunnel. Even when he widened his eyes, he could not see anything. Even his consciousness twisted as the tunnel twisted and turned. The 9 provinces were left behind, and the demon domain drew closer and closer. Right at this moment, a smile appeared on his face, and he suddenly stopped moving. He turned around and punched out. Tremors of the ox demon. With a rumble, the darkness shattered, and cracks spread out. Between the cracks was even deeper darkness. The bone-eating shaman king, at the very front, could not react in time. A black crack swept past his waist, almost cutting him in half. Intense pain filled his body, and he roared out furiously, Li Qingshan! Idiot! I don't have the habit of being someone's dog. The other demon kings came to a halt in a hurry. They were all slightly injured, but they were both surprised, furious, and overjoyed. Sure enough, he still wanted to fight back. Boom, boom, boom. Li Qingshan swung his fists again, and the black cracks crisscrossed and spread out like a spiderweb until the space around him shattered to pieces. Just now, he let out a long sigh. The demon kings retreated far away, afraid to approach him. No matter how powerful their bodies were, they could not withstand the cutting of the spatial cracks. The black cracks constantly crisscrossed, weaving into a black curtain. Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan vanished behind the curtain. The meditative brain king said, "Bone-eating king, what does great god Qiongqi say about a situation like this? Kill him." "How?" The demon kings looked at one another. The shattered space isolated everything. Even sound, sight, and soul sense could not pass through, let alone attack. The bone-eating shaman king said viciously, "We'll stand guard here and see just how long he can last. The space will naturally recover, and that will be his death." The surroundings were pitch black, like they were drifting on a lone island, except the surroundings were not rippling seawater, but shattered space. It was a true natural chasm. Li Qingshan tightened his grip on Gong Yuan and avoided a tiny black crack. He grinned. What do you think? You're dreaming if you want to force me to go to the demon domain. What do we do now?" Gong Yuan looked around. The shattered space in the surroundings was both a protection and a cage to them. They were still in dire straits, or it could be said that they were even more despairing than before. Since they had already fallen out, the bone-eating shaman king would never give them the opportunity to surrender to the demon domain. Chapter 956. Little Anne's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she experienced an intense sense of unease. She drifted out of the hall and gazed in the direction that Li Qingshan had left in. Apart from him, there was no one else who could make her feel uneasy. The mountains and rivers were heavy, and the sea of trees was boundless. Even she could not see that far away. The glow of the setting sun dyed the stone steps of the hall red. Standing on them, she drifted about as her clothes ruffled in the wind, becoming even more beautiful. However, her face was shrouded by a shadow. She took out the bamboo jade lot of the cloud bookcase from her sumeru ring, closed her eyes, and silently practiced the cloud bookcase of the 7 lots. The 7 powers of yin, yang, and the 5 elements shone with rainbow light, condensing into a multicolored lot container in her hand. It was as resplendent as a kaleidoscope, reflecting the heavenly secrets and fate. She silently recited Li Qingshan's name and shook the lot container gently, beginning her divination. She had not fallen behind in the methods of the school of Yin-Yang because she practiced the Buddhist Dharma. Instead, as she practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, she gained a deeper understanding of it. After all, one of the 6 most renowned abilities of Buddhism was the predestination connection. It was impossible for a Buddhist cultivator at the white bone bodhisattva's level to not practice it. A portion of the path of white bone and great beauty specifically dealt with this aspect. She still did not have the right to reach too deep of a level, but she still gained a different understanding when she combined it with the cloud bookcase of the 7 lots. Originally, Li Qingshan could block out most of the probing of the heavenly secrets with the spirit turtle transformation, but their fates were closely linked. They were like one body, so they could sense each other. In the past, when Li Qingshan was hunted down by the Dragon King of the Sea and suffered rebirth, she could clearly sense it even from the distant Chan monastery of Devanaga. Her divination regarding him was particularly accurate too, coupled with the fact that she was not divining the elusive future, but the past and present that had already happened and were currently happening. The relevant information was extremely abundant too. She even knew his rough location, so the divination process was extremely smooth. As soon as she closed her eyes, she caught hold of the thread of fate that was Li Qingshan. He was enveloped by omens of great danger, currently in great danger and trouble. He seemed to be sealed in a certain place. That place was basically cut off from the outside world. Even the threat of fate that transcended space felt intermittent. Did I fall into a trap of the demon's domain? Little and frowned slightly and immediately made an accurate deduction. He clenched his fist and said, "It's all because of me." The Buddha's aura and the flame on her body that were in balance suddenly became chaotic. As the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. She almost couldn't help but want to rush to the rescue immediately. Biting her fingers, she calmed herself down. He muttered to himself, "My current state, even if it's my best state, it's useless, it's not an ordinary trap. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that, according to the revelation of fate, although he was in a desperate situation, it would not be fatal for a short period of time. The problem was how to help him out of this predicament. Ask for help? The Chan Monastery of Devanaga, Feng Shiwu, Banyan Tree King, the King of Southern Yu, Merfolk King? In that instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. He continuously eliminated, denied, and chose. First of all, it was impossible for the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Right now, the Mist Province was still hostile to the Green Province. Secondly, Feng Shiwu and the Banyan Tree King might be willing to help, but they were both plant demons. They could not move their bodies easily, so they had a certain range of movement. Although the Banyan Tree King could mobilize some demon kings from the Mist Province, it was impossible for him to order these demon kings to throw their lives at the demon folk. The two merfolk kings of the South Sea would take action for Gong Yuan, but gaining their trust would definitely not be easy. And there would definitely be a merfolk king watching over the Crystal Palace. Just how effective could a single merfolk king be? It was not optimistic at all. Finally, the King of Southern Yu was the best person to ask for help from. With the Silver Dragon King's great destructive power, and fending off demon folk was part of his duty too. So Li Qingshan had basically been helping him the entire time by purging the demons, so it only made sense for him to lend a hand. However, there was a 30% chance that he would not lend a hand. He finished planning in the blink of an eye, little, and arrived where Ru Xian cultivated in a flash. After explaining the situation, he asked her to go to Savage Mountain and ask for help from the Banyan Tree King. Only the Banyan Tree King could contact the King of Southern Yu quickly and convince him to take action. Ru Xian saw how stern and slightly worried Little and was. She understood the severity of the matter, so she cut right to the chase and immediately made her way to Savage Mountain. After sending off Ru Xian, Little and seemed to make up his mind about something, he returned to the hall and thought. Qingshan has always been balancing the demonic and divine, balancing water and fire. Great beauty and white bone, the transformation of appearance and the change of life and death, also reinforce and counteract each other. The white bone bodhisattva has converted her entire Buddhist cultivation into the demonic path of white bone. So why don't I try and balance the two? The King of Southern, you might not lend a hand. I'm better off relying on myself than others. I can only undergo the third heavenly tribulation as soon as possible. Only then can I save him. With a thought like that, she took out the two arcane treasures the divine none of the South Sea had left behind for her, before suddenly conjuring her golden avatar. It had a total of 4 arms, one holding the skull prayer beads, one holding the scripture of discipline, one wielding the disciplinary ruler, and one gripping the Buddha slaying sword firmly. The blood sea banner stood upright on her back, spraying out a river of blood that wrapped around the golden avatar. Under the golden avatar, her body underwent a wondrous change. The left half of her body was covered in flesh and blood. Not only was she a striking beauty, but she also seemed benevolent and solemn, shining with Buddhist light. Half of the back of her head was enveloped by a ring of light. However, The right half of her body was covered in jagged white bones. The samadhi flames of white bone lingered there, hiding thousands of twisted, pained faces. It was cold and merciless, as if it could destroy Buddhas, destroy Dharma, and slaughter all life. For a moment, good and evil alternated, Buddhism and demonic coexisting. It was indescribably profound. However, it was extremely dangerous to her. Whether it was using the samadhi flames of white bone to devour the Buddhist light or having the Buddhist light suppress and extinguish the samadhi flames of white bone, it could be regarded as a path for her. It was not dangerous at all. However, as soon as she tried to balance the two and make them coexist, she was immediately pushed to the most extreme state possible. Not only did the two powers contend against one another, but even every single thought in her head was debating with one another. She was like a coin that had been tossed high into the air, with the two sides constantly flipping back and forth. The entire world spun around, pursuing an outcome that was neither heads nor tails. Instead, it stood firmly. The difficulty was obvious. The slightest carelessness could lead to her splitting and collapsing completely. As a matter of fact, she did not even know whether it was possible for her to stand firmly or not. After all, even the white-bone bodhisattva had come from Buddhism before becoming a demon. However, neither side of her had any hesitation. During the process of practicing the path of white bone and great beauty, she had once fallen into confusion. It was him who made her understand it with a few sentences. It was not because of how profound the words were. They were even simple and direct to the point of being rather naive. However, the crucial factor was not the content of the words, but him who had spoken them. She had never pursued the profound mysteries of the Buddhist Dharma in her life, nor had she become engrossed in the freedom of the demonic path. She only wanted to stay by his side forever. That was all. As long as her heart was there, all Buddhas and demons could not change it. Namo Amitabha. Destroy Buddhas, destroy Buddhas, destroy Buddhas. She suddenly opened her eyes. Two voices rang out at the same time, and she brought her palms together. Chapter 9:57. The pavilions in the surroundings of the hall all collapsed like they had been torn apart. They kicked up a cloud of dust that enveloped the myriad poison cult. The two forces collided, and a coin fell to the ground loudly. Would it stand firmly, or would it shatter loudly? Savage Mountain. Qingshan is trapped and in dire straits. Little and has sent me to ask for help from Senior. Ru Xian arrived under the great banyan tree. What? The banyan tree king was surprised too. Regular demon kings were not Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan's opponents when they worked together. Even if they came across a few more demon kings, they could always flee if they could not defeat them. He dared not tarry. He immediately gathered his focus and used his innate ability. A while later, the wild grass and reeds in the swamp thousands of kilometers away all became his eyes and ears. He saw the strands of demon chi that rushed into the air, as well as the demon gods they had conjured. He could not help but be taken aback. Just what kind of existence had they provoked for them to go to such lengths? Even if the king of Southern Yu fell into a trap like this, he would struggle to escape. The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, supported by 12 pillars of demon chi, was extremely powerful, but it came at quite a hefty price. This amount of power was enough to carve out another 12 demon caverns and send out even more demon folk, yet it was only used to deal with Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan. Even if they had cleaned up a few demon caverns together, they should not have attracted so much attention. The number of demon caverns that the king of Southern Yu had suppressed and cleaned up was only greater than theirs, but he had never received such treatment. Cheongchi taking action was equivalent to a great general paying attention to a corner of the battlefield, a battle between a foot soldier. A casual ambush would be a fatal blow. No matter how alert and skilled the foot soldier was in battle, he would not be able to escape. Senior, Ru Xian asked again. Her face was filled with concern. That'll be troublesome. The banyan tree king sank into his thoughts. It was definitely not a demon king who could set down a trap like this. It was probably not the demon emperor who had led the battle this time either, but an existence of an even higher level. It was already very difficult to break this 12 citadel demon formation of the evil, and he still had to consider whether the existence who laid this trap had any other backup plans. Even he was very hesitant. There was a saying that went, "If gods openly oppose humans, then no one will be able to deal with them." They were all kings among cultivators, but Cheongchi was an evil god that even the bone-eating shaman king worshipped. In fact that Li Qingshan and the others were only trapped and not in a desperate situation immediately surprised the banyan tree king. Qingshan was able to wipe out the demons with your guidance. Senior, I can't just leave them to die. Don't worry. I'll ask the king of Southern Yu to take action. If it really doesn't work, then I'll have to put aside my pride and ask those young friends, said the banyan tree king. Within the Silver Dragon King, the handsome king of Southern Yu stood with his hands behind his back like a divine sword, gazing at the demon cavern below. He smiled, clearly in quite a good mood. He had suppressed another demon cavern this time, and even left behind a demon king. As long as he dealt a painful blow to the demon emperor in the demon domain, he would reconsider his target of invasion. After all, this world had fended off the invasions of the demon domain every single time over the course of time. The reason why he was in a good mood was the pacification of the South. He could not help but admit that Li Qingshan had impressed him once again. He was actually able to convince Gong Yuan to work with him and basically sweep through all the demon caverns in the South. It was said that he even killed a few demon kings. He really did live up to his title as the King of the South. Compared to these accomplishments, the information revealed behind the scenes delighted him even more. The merfolk, Queen Gong Yuan's actions, symbolized the peace of the South Sea. Li Qingshan was no longer a potential threat either. If the Chan monastery of Devanaga knew he would help them out so much, they would probably regret sending him to the south. And behind Li Qingshan was the shadow of the great demon king of the Mist Province, vaguely expressing his stance. If they could receive his assistance, the threat of the demon plague would be drastically reduced. At this moment, he suddenly turned around and said to a tiny banyan tree-potted plant on the desk, "What do you want, fellow?" "I want you to save someone." "Who?" "Li Qingshan." "Li Qingshan, have you thought of him?" Gong Yuan said impatiently, but her voice did not contain the irritation or despair of facing death. Instead, it was more like a cold wife complaining about her useless husband actually getting lost in a journey. "What are you in such a hurry for? Aren't I thinking right now? Don't disturb me." Li Qingshan was also impatient. He propped up his chin with one hand and pondered with a frown. "I don't think you can think of anything at all. I actually almost believed you earlier. If I had known earlier, I might as well throw my life at them. I've already said it before. Don't even think about dying before me. Just stay there obediently. Didn't you say you were going to collect my corpse? Humph. I don't think there's any difference whether it's in front or behind." Gong Yuan sneered. "Then do you like it in front or behind?" Li Qingshan smiled lewdly and slid his hand down from her waist, but he was immediately frozen by her icy cold gaze. He pulled his hand back, awkwardly, and rubbed his nose. "All right then. I just want to ease the tense atmosphere." Gong Yuan rolled her eyes helplessly. Ever since they were trapped, when had they ever been nervous? She did want to feel a little nervous, but When she faced this careless guy, even life and death did not seem like a big deal. Li Qingshan, you're almost going to get me killed. Can you show me some respect? Li Qingshan considered it seriously and smiled. Gong Yuan, I can't. I might as well die with you right now. Gong Yuan gritted her teeth. Wait, I've thought of something. Li Qingshan took out the Azura field and asked with a smile, which do you like more? The Azura realm or the demon realm? I don't like either. Li Qingshan shrugged and entered the Azura field. Gong Yuan felt her body relax. She finally did not have to stick close to him. However, when she looked at the boundless darkness around her, she felt a little empty. Her expression gradually returned to its icy cold state. A moment later, Li Qingshan came out of the Azura field again. He unceremoniously grabbed her soft waist and hugged her tightly in his arms. He seemed to be very familiar with her. All right then, you can't go anywhere. He had thought that the blood-colored whirlpool in the Azura field could lead to the Azura realm and could be used as the final path of retreat. However, when he entered, the blood-colored whirlpool was also filled with darkness. He had indeed split the surrounding void extremely thoroughly. Even the Azura field could not connect to the Azura realm. I knew it, Gong Yuan said in disdain, and adjusted to a more comfortable position. It seems to have grown bigger, Li Qingshan said solemnly. Through her open clothes, he could see the snow-white skin and the deep cleavage between them. Separated by the thin mermaid silk, he could see the slightly cold fullness. Even though it was not his first time feeling it, he still felt that it was not bad. Gong Yuan stared at him coldly. Chapter 958. Just when Gong Yuan wanted to refute him, she saw his expression change. He raised his head slightly and sighed with a smile. There's still a very long way to go. I can't die here, right now. His gaze seemed to pierce through the boundless darkness and reach an extremely distant place, like a frog gazing at the stars or a child pursuing a beautiful dream. It was so insignificant, but it was also so persistent. In that moment, Gong Yuan experienced a false impression. She was clearly in his arms, yet she seemed to be separated by a shattered space. Suddenly, she felt that he was rather lonely and pitiful. The light he gave off made her unable to look at him directly. Their minds connected. His complicated desires were replaced by an even deeper desire. She could not help but sigh. Under his almost mortal appearance, he was still a cultivator after all. At this moment, the shattered space in the surroundings automatically recovered, like the surface of a lake that had been shattered. With his current strength, he was nowhere close to flattening the surface of the lake. Once a crack appears, power the heart of the abyss with everything you have and provide me with the power of ruin's end. However, those guys outside will definitely use this opportunity to attack. You have to protect me, for a while. I can, said Gong Yuan. I might not be able to become your partner, but if I can survive this. Li Qingshan suddenly broke into a self-deprecating smile. Forget it. Let's not talk about something like that. Let's work together and slaughter those bastards outside. As the shattered space recovered, the demon kings were eager too. Li Qingshan slowly raised his fist and threw a few punches in the surroundings. Every single punch was extremely clumsy and heavy as if it bore a heavy burden. The power of tremors condensed on his fists as he worked hard to control them to the limit. Pieces of the void shattered again. Under his precise control, there was only a tiny crack left. Gong Yuan immediately powered the heart of the abyss and connected with the world of ruin's end. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and dismissed all of his stray thoughts in that moment. He circulated the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression with all his strength, absorbing the deep, cold power of ruin's end. It was like he had returned to his home, that he had been away from for a very long time. His mind became extremely calm. At the same time, a cluster of black chi pierced through the crack in space and turned into a strange, black snake biting towards his neck viciously. Li Qingshan acted as if he didn't notice it, wholeheartedly immersing himself in cultivation. A cold light flashed, and a diamond-shaped ice crystal shot into the snake's mouth, defeating it. Gong Yuan coldly stood in front of Li Qingshan, thinking, "I haven't lived enough either." A smile flashed across Li Qingshan's lips before vanishing. Afterwards, he completely devoted his mind to the deep world of ruins and, if he wanted to become a demon king, balancing fire and water was not the only way. There was actually another way, pushing the spirit turtle transformation to the 5th layer. In fact, this path had been laid out before him a long time ago. However, after considering and giving it a try, he still chose to give up. This was because the phoenix transformation back then was too weak. Once he gave up, it would make his future cultivation exceptionally difficult. However, now that the phoenix transformation had reached the 4th layer, equal to the spirit turtle transformation, the latent problems in this aspect were much smaller. Although balancing the two first was still the best choice, it was impossible for everything in life to go according to plan. However, since someone wanted to give him a little surprise, he decided to give them a little surprise too. The spirit turtle transformation had been on the verge of breaking through a long time ago. After 20 years of accumulation, he was only a single step away. With the support of ruins and this step became especially easy. A while later, there was a great rumble in his sea of consciousness. After a moment of upheaval, it was immediately suppressed. A spirit turtle dove deep into the bottom of his sea of consciousness, slowly extending a head that resembled a dragon, yet was not. It let out a deep growl. Gong Yuan gritted her teeth to fend off the frenzied attacks of the demon kings. She sensed something and glanced out of the corner of her eye. In a daze, she seemed to see a spirit turtle staring at her with a tranquil gaze. At a closer glance, she discovered that it was Li Qingshan's gaze. Not only did his presence become even greater and more profound, but even his appearance had undergone many changes. His scarlet hair and eyes returned to black hair and eyes. His ox horns, claws, and teeth vanished. His face lost some of its handsomeness, but it gained some sharpness. Having suppressed the ox demon and tiger demon, he had returned to the original Li Qingshan. "You've worked hard," Li Qingshan said. Gong Yuan's long hair was disheveled, and her presence was feeble. There was a wound on her shoulder. Although it had been sealed in ice, it was still black. Even if it was just a tiny crack, blocking the various attacks of 7 demon kings was anything but easy. Moreover, during this period of time, the crack had widened by a lot. If it were not for the fact that the demon kings were afraid of being dragged down with them and were unwilling to take the risk, the situation would have been even more dangerous. "No problem. I'll trust you one more time. Don't disappoint me this time." Gong Yuan swung the dark power of ruins end with her left hand and bellowed, "Icebound domain." She never expected the ice wall to block the attacks of the demon kings immediately, even sealing up the spatial crack for a moment. She was surprised. She never thought she could erupt with such power. On one hand, she no longer had to split her attention to support Li Qingshan's cultivation, and on the other hand, Li Qingshan could use the power of ruins and with even greater ease now that he had broken through to the 5th layer of the spirit turtle. "When have I ever let you down?" Li Qingshan took a step forward and threw a punch. The power of tremors spread out with a whistle, shattering the surrounding space. He glanced at his fist and smiled. Sure enough, it's quite effective. Although the ox demon transformation had not improved at all, the various transformations of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine had always influenced one another. Going from the 4th layer to the 5th layer for the spirit turtle transformation was a huge improvement. His control over his power had increased significantly. The sound of thunder rang out through the air, filled with supreme dignity and shaking up the mind. As the absolute law that measured a cultivator's cultivation, even the shattering of space was unable to stop the descent of the heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan's smile vanished. He had already taken this crucial step. What came next was the true challenge. "Wait for me," Li Qingshan said before diving into the Azura field again. The sense of intimacy and tranquility was extracted from her heart, leaving Gong Yuan feeling empty inside. She sucked in a deep breath and said softly, "All right." At the same time, in the myriad poison cult, Little and stood in a pile of rubble. The skull prayer beads turned into skulls as they flew around in the surroundings, with pages of golden scriptures surrounding them. Among them, she still possessed a strange appearance of half beauty and half white bone. She stood with one hand pressed against the Buddha slaying sword while the other pointed at the sky with the disciplinary ruler. The blood sea banner stood upright behind her, fluttering in the wind. Golden Buddhist light merged into her skin and spread through her flesh and blood, covering half of her white bones. In the blink of an eye, she had turned into an alluring beauty, with her head lowered and eyes filled with benevolence and solemnity, preventing anyone from blaspheming her. However, the samadhi flames of white bone burned silently in the depths of her eyes, emotionless and emotionless. Perhaps it was the effects of her determination, or perhaps the white bone bodhisattva had left behind this possibility in the first place. "Qingshan, I've done it. Wait for me." Chapter 9:59. A streak of silver light shot through the sky, stopping firmly above the great swamp. The king of Southern Yu stood with his hands behind his back. Strands of demon chi rushed into the air, and the demon gods stood tall. He could not help but be taken aback. What a grand formation! The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous originated from extremely ancient times. It was very widespread in the demon domain. The king of Southern Yu had seen his fair share of them as he fought and suppressed demon caverns, but this was the first time he had seen such a grand formation. No wonder you wanted me to save him. With this formation alone, who else can save him in the Mist Province apart from me? However, the king of savages is trapped inside, so he's probably dead already. There's no need for him to save him. The king of Southern Yu looked back at the banyan tree bonsai on the table. According to the divination, he's still alive. Please get through the formation as soon as possible. The banyan tree king swayed his branches and said sternly, "What's so special about this Li Qingshan for him to receive such favor from you, fellow?" The king of Southern Yu sighed. The banyan tree king did not say anything else, but just the word "please" was worth more than 1,000 words. This child is anything but ordinary. He shouldn't have died here, and the existence that set down such a trap probably isn't here to take his life. The banyan tree king's voice grew deeper and deeper. "What do you mean?" "I suspect that the demon caverns that have been swept through and the demon kings that have died are all just bait. Bait." The king of Southern Yu was finally alarmed. Just who would be baited by using demon kings as bait? And what would they be baiting? If he's threatened and falls into the demon domain, it won't just be the Mist Province where demons run amok before long. The entire 9 provinces will become another demon domain, the banyan tree kings said. After spending so many years together, he had gained an extremely deep understanding of Li Qingshan. This was something the king of Southern Yu could not compare to. Even though the king of Southern Yu guarded the Mist Province and possessed great authority, his vision was inevitably limited to this well. He was unable to see the secret on Li Qingshan that originated from beyond the well and the heavens. What? It seems like I've underestimated him. The king of southern Yu swung his hand, and the silver dragon king shone with resplendent silver light. The dragon head at the front of the ship opened its mouth, and specks of silver light converged together, becoming brighter and brighter. It was like a silver sun, even brighter than the sun in the sky. The 12 demon gods turned their heads and looked over. Their gazes seemed to have substance, piercing through the void and containing extremely deep and chaotic evil thoughts. The king of southern Yu shuddered, and his face darkened before returning to normal a while later. He said, "Impressive." He purposely parked the Silver Dragon King at a safe distance. Being good at defense was the disadvantage of almost all formations. As long as he kept a sufficient distance, there wouldn't be any danger. However, this 12 heavenly demon ominous formation could attack from such a distance. Furthermore, it was a direct attack on the soul. If not for the Silver Dragon King blocking it, Xiao Chun might have suffered some damage. "Attack!" The king of southern Yu said in a dignified manner. The Silver Dragon King shuddered, and an extremely resplendent streak of light pierced through the surroundings, rushing straight towards the 12 heavenly demon formation of the ominous. This was the dragon head cannon that could easily destroy mountains and temples. It had directly blasted away the upper half of a demon god. At the end of the day, it was just an illusion, not a true demon god. However, the king of southern Yu did not ease up at all. Although he had destroyed a demon god, there were still 11 demon gods left, and even the demon god that had been blasted away rapidly recovered. The foundation of the 12 heavenly demon formation of the ominous were the 12 demon caverns. They came from another world, so it was very difficult for a single strike to collapse the entire formation. Using the opening created by the cannon, the king of southern Yu peered in. Originally, he wanted to create an opening so that he could trap Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan, but he did not see any signs of them. There was not even a single demon king. It's already too late. They're either already dead, or they've passed through the demon cavern and entered the demon domain. The king of southern Yu shook his head. Although he could destroy the 12 heavenly demon formation of the ominous, as long as he continued attacking, it would take up quite a lot of time. The attacks of the Silver Dragon King were powerful, but they came at a tremendous cost. He needed to consider whether it was worth it or not. "He's still alive, and he hasn't fallen into the demon domain," said the Banyan Tree King. If Li Qingshan were dead, little, and would never have sent Ru Xian to ask for reinforcements. If he had completely fallen into the demon domain, it would be extremely difficult to divine, and it would not be exactly a dire situation. The king of southern Yu sank into his thoughts. If the demon folk use this formation to establish a stronghold and gain a foothold, the demon plague of the Mist Province will never be pacified again. "That's definitely not the outcome we want," said the Banyan Tree King. What he was implying was that even if it was not for the sake of saving Li Qingshan, he could not give up on destroying the formation for the sake of his own business. The king of southern Yu's eyes lit up. He smiled. Whatever. I'll just go for broke this time. I'll gather people to destroy the formation right now. Please help me out too. If Li Qingshan is still alive, I'll definitely save him." The Banyan Tree King had always refused to assist him in suppressing the demon plague. He finally relented this time, so he felt rather grateful towards Li Qingshan. All right. In order to protect the interests of the demons, the Banyan Tree King originally did not want to get involved so early, but he could not just turn a blind eye to Li Qingshan. Moreover, he had a feeling that if the king of savages became a demon king, they would have already lost half the battle before it had even officially begun. If Little and continued to follow in his footsteps, they would be at an even greater disadvantage. So he could not just turn a blind eye to this. In a few words, they completed a negotiation that would affect the entire situation of the Mist Province. The two kings who stood at the apex of the Mist Province began to issue orders at the same time. In the gloomy underground cities on the majestic peaks, and in the vast jungle, demon kings and great cultivators listened to the summons. Qingshan, you have to hold on a little longer, thought the Banyan Tree King. Li Qingshan reverted to his original form, standing there with his head held high, gazing at the sky. The blood-red swirl in the azure field had already become pitch-black tribulation clouds. Thunder rumbled inside, like the wheels of a god driving a chariot. He would occasionally pass through the blood-red land and see a rebel. Not only did he refuse to kneel down and accept his fate, but he even tried to defy the heavens, so he could not help but lash out with his whip. Boom! The scorching lightning struck Li Qingshan's back. There was a hint of bright violet in it, like a steel wire needed in a whip. It immediately split open his flesh, revealing the tiger bones that shone with a metallic luster. Roar! Li Qingshan stood like a mountain, without budging at all. He spread his arms, and his scarlet hair drifted about as he roared at the sky. The pitch-black sky immediately turned into a violent pool of lightning. Thousands of bolts of lightning crisscrossed like dragons and snakes dancing wildly. Before he was completely swallowed up, he sensed something and gazed into the distance. He wondered how little Lin was doing. A skull prayer bead shattered loudly, blocking a bolt of tribulation, lightning for little, and, as a life-bound, arcane treasure. Her mind shuddered as well, but she was unable to spare a second glance at it. She pushed her path of the sword to the limit, and the Buddha-slaying sword cut through several bolts of tribulation lightning. The blood sea banner behind her had dimmed, covered in scorch marks. It was no longer able to produce another river of blood or swallow another bolt of lightning. Her golden body had already shattered, revealing the jagged white bones beneath her great beauty. The samadhi flames of white bone blazed in her eyes. No matter how many life-threatening threats she faced, she did not waver at all. She listened to the furious roars of the lightning silently as she swung her sword through the pool of lightning like a phantom. How satisfying! Li Qingshan bellowed out, ignoring the warnings from the spirit turtle's intelligence and the rustling of the phoenix's wings. He allowed the lightning to cleanse his body. His feet remained buried deep in the ground the entire time, and his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Who had once said that fighting against the heavens, fighting against the earth, and fighting against people was endless joy? He cast his life and death aside, completely submerging himself in the pleasure of battle. What a tremendous lightning tribulation! Is this really the third heavenly tribulation? Yin Qing hid far away in a corner of the Azura field and watched on in shock. She had once seen an Azura commander undergo a tribulation and become an Azura king, but the scale of the heavenly tribulation was much smaller than this. Even with her ability to hide in space, she dared not touch a single bolt of lightning. Although Li Qingshan possessed strength that far exceeded his peers due to his cultivation of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, that did not mean his tribulation could be as easy as eating or drinking. The heavenly tribulation was the most strict and fair judge. The more powerful his body was, the more powerful the heavenly tribulation would be. Other items were the same. Borrowing a pile of powerful arcane treasures, formations, and talismans before the tribulation would not make the tribulation any safer. The more powerful the arcane treasures and other items he used, the greater and heavier the heavenly tribulation would be. If he could not unleash 120% of the power of these items, such as the sea-splitting sword against Yi Duanhai, then he might as well not use them at all. When Little and underwent the tribulation, she placed the discipline ruler and scripture bestowed by the divine, none of the South Sea, into her Sumeru ring. She only used the life-bound arcane treasures forged from the path of white bone and great beauty. The skull prayer beads she had forged with great difficulty shattered in the lightning, and the sea of blood in the blood sea banner had almost dried up. Even the Buddha's slaying sword was covered in cracks. However, these life-bound arcane treasures underwent the tribulation with her, enduring the refinement of the lightning tribulation as they advanced towards a higher level with great difficulty. With a clang, Tiger's Fong suddenly left its sheath and turned into a huge blade. Gripped firmly in Li Qingshan's hand, he swung it towards the sky. The pool of lightning stirred, and countless bolts of lightning gathered on the blade, pouring into Li Qingshan's body through the veins and meridians on it. At that moment, all of his bones were clearly visible. The electricity penetrated his bones, making him tremble all over. Even his soul was about to be ripped apart. The might of the heavenly tribulation had already reached the limit. He knew that he was already at a critical juncture of life and death. If he could not endure it, he would be crushed and his soul destroyed. He grinned viciously and gritted his teeth, using the 4 abilities and the 4 transformations of the demonic and divine at the same time. The illusions of the ox demon, tiger demon, spirit turtle, and phoenix appeared on him one by one, either silent or roaring loudly. At that moment, the ox demon's tenacity, tiger demon's fighting spirit, spirit turtle's profundity, and phoenix's pride all gathered on him, forming a whole. The earth bore everything, sharing the damage with him. Fierce winds whistled and swept through, stirring up the tribulation clouds in the sky. The black water was unfathomable, judging every single attack. The flames burned endlessly, healing the wounds all over his body. The blood-red soil beneath his feet was crystallized by the tribulation lightning before being blasted to smithereens. The fierce wind picked it up, and it danced through the air. Under the illumination of the lightning, it formed a resplendent, illusory spectacle enveloping Li Qingshan's mountainous figure. It seemed like 1,000 years had passed. The thunder had vanished at a certain time, but it continued to reverberate. The crystalline sand drifted to the ground, turning into a crystalline desert. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.